Supervisors, clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Bomke?
Here.
Mr. Cavalier?
Here.
Mr. Cohen? Here. Mr. Dudenheffer?
Here.
Mrs. Mauer? Here. Ms. Shelton?
Here.
Mr. Snellings?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to call on our Vice Chairman, Mr. Mark Dudenheffer, for a presentation to our Recognizing Telecommunicators Week. And I know we have some of those folks in the audience, and if they'd come up and join Mr. Dudenheffer and at the table, it would be appreciated. I'll let Mr. Dudenheffer introduce his assistant.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. I hear you guys are the newest operators. All right. Well, we're glad to have you. Let me come here, Alex. Come here. This is Alex, and I'm going to tell a little story about Alex here that's relevant to the proclamation we're going to give and the recognition we're going to give to, they call them telecommunicators now instead of 911 operators, so I got to be careful what I say. But Alex will be 8 in a couple of months, but when he was 18 months old, in his baby bed, he aspirated a kernel of unpopped popcorn into his lungs and collapsed his lungs. And it started a chain of events which incorporates and the communicators and all the professionals in 911 and the first responders all the way through the doctors into the hospital. But my daughter-in-law, his mother, called the 911 operators, and you can imagine she was frantic at the time, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't know what had happened, but she knew he was blue, he was having trouble breathing, and she held him in her lap, sitting in the driveway, and she, based on the professionalism and everything that happened there, the ambulance, she could hear the ambulance in the background, and it gave her comfort as the ambulance got closer and closer. I think, though, about a half a mile out, they turned it off, and that scared her. But it knew where to go, and they took all the right information. They knew what they were dealing with when they got there, and needless to say, he was brought to the hospital. He was attended to by the doctors. He was stabilized. And then he ended up at the children's intensive care unit down at VCU, and the doctor spent a few days trying to find what was wrong with him. But he wouldn't have made it much longer without the professional help of the whole team of first responders that we have. So I wasn't going to say his last name, but this is my grandson, and we are extremely happy that he is here with us now. And he wanted to participate in this so he could say thank you to you guys. So I'm going to read the proclamation really fast, and then I'm going to let Alex hand it to you and shake your hands and say thank you, okay? This is a proclamation recognizing National Telecommunicators Week, this April 14th to 20th of 2019. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require a response from the sheriff's office and fire and rescue personnel, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of deputies, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of Stafford County deputies and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from individuals who call 911 or telephone the Stafford County Emergency Communications Center, and whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact county citizens have with emergency services, and they are ready to take a call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single most vital link for Stafford deputies, firefighters, and paramedics by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them with information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas the public safety telecommunicators of the Stafford County Sheriff's Office and Emergency Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and emergency treatment of patients like Alex. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are more than a calm and reassuring voice on the other end of the phone, contributing daily to the public safety needs of the community, they are the unseen first responders serving the public in countless ways, many times without recognition. And whereas each Stafford County Public Safety Communications officer has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their duties by providing a timely and quality response to those who have experienced emergencies. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on this, the 16th day of April, 2019, be and hereby does recognize and honor its public safety telecommunicators and their dedication to the citizens of Stafford County. Well, thank you. We're so proud of you guys. We're so pleased to have you. And the Duden family is especially thankful for the work that you guys do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dudenheffer and Alex. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mr. Cavalier and Ms. Shelton for a proclamation to Aquia Harbor.
The proclamation for Aquia Harbor, which I'll go ahead and state up front. I've lived there for 36 years, so Cindy's helping me out on this one because we both represent the area. And, you know, it's just a wonderful place to raise a family, and, you know, there's so many amenities there that are available to everyone. You know, they do offset some county costs by having their own police force and guarded gate community and private roads, and so you know, there's some duplication of effort, but it's all done, you know, for the best interest of everybody. And I think the county appreciates everything Aquia Harbor does, and so we wanted to recognize you on your 50th anniversary. And by the way, this is Steve Holder. He's on the board of directors in Aquia Harbor. And he also took my money on the golf course yesterday, so I wasn't real happy to see him up here today. I'll let you hear from the Blue Tees the next time. This is a proclamation recognizing Aquia Harbor's 50th anniversary. Whereas Aquia Harbor is a beautiful community located along the Potomac River in Stafford County with more than 9,000 residents, and whereas Aquia Harbor has horse stables, swimming pools, a country club, 9-hole golf course and driving range, a variety of parks and playgrounds, and the beautiful Aquia Harbor Marina. And whereas the community of Aquia Harbor is fortunate to have its own private police department, and Stafford County deputies and Aquia Harbor officers routinely work together on serious calls for service in Aquia Harbor, and at times the Aquia Harbor Police Department is called upon to assist Stafford deputies on serious incidents where extra manpower is needed, and the close working relationship between the two departments is a benefit for both Aquia Harbor and Stafford County residents. And whereas Aquia Harbor partnered with Stafford County on locating Stafford Fire and Rescue Company 9 in the community, benefiting both the harbor and the Stafford County community. And whereas the residents of this community have made many valued contributions to the community by serving in community organizations, public office, churches, schools, law enforcement, and many other ways. And whereas Aquia Harbor neighborhood itself has served as a boost to the development of Stafford County and a draw for a diverse group of residents. and whereas Aquia Harbor is celebrating its 50th anniversary of its being on an unparalleled waterfront community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors on the 16th day of April 2019, that it be and hereby does recognize Aquia Harbor on its 50th anniversary and for the many contributions of its residents and the impact of the community on Stafford County.
Thank you, Mr. Cavalier, Ms. Shelton, Chairman Snellings, Vice Chair Dudenheffer, and the entire Stafford County Board for your formal recognition of this milestone for the Aquia Harbor community. Our board president, Alexis Harvey, wanted so much to be here, but is home with a sick child. My name is Steve Holder, and I serve on the Aquia Harbor Board of Directors. I'm here along with our general manager, Patricia Harmon. Aquia Harbor was the first planned community in Stafford County. Though she has begun to show her age a little, she is still as beautiful and cherished as she was in 1969. We have built wonderful bridges of cooperation with our county counterparts and appreciate the special relationship between the sheriff's office and our police department, and between our leadership and our county officials. It was actually on this date, April 16th, when our charter was submitted in 1969. So we thank you again for acknowledging this special day and for this proclamation, which we will proudly share with our community.
I just wanted to give my own personal thanks to Mr. Cavalier. I know that you've lived there forever. I almost lived there. I didn't, well, okay, not forever, but a very long time. But I really want to appreciate all that Aquia Harbor has been doing for us. And so we just mentioned a few things, but having you guys as one solid part of our community really means a lot to us. So thank you very much, and I'm very proud that we could do this for you today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cavalier and Ms. Shelton. I remember very well when Aquia Harbor was, first house was built. I think I was 8 or something like that, at any rate. More like 28. At this time, we've all been waiting on this, the 2019 General Assembly wrap-up from Miss Julia Hammond. Julia, there you are. Come on down.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here to talk about our successful legislative agenda. This year's General Assembly session was a little bit different than others. There was some, we'll call it white noise, that definitely created some challenges. But when it comes to Stafford's priorities, because we work in coalitions, we work not only with VACO and VML, but other stakeholder groups, we were, I'd like to say, very successful. The first item, and I'm going through the agenda, or the list of our bills based upon priorities and by topics. The HOA property transfer trigger point put in by our Senator Somerville. The bill does have the requirements in there. It does not have the sticks that we had hoped for and asked for. There was some debate as to whether localities have the ability or the authority to withhold certain bonds on the developers. Senator Somerville submitted at the end of February an informal request to the AG's office for an opinion on that matter to settle it. To date, he has not heard back from them yet, but that official request did go in, and so we will hear something. Assuming they come back saying that we don't have the authority, the plan is to, assuming you still want to go forward with the issue, is to come up with our stick legislation for next year. But one would hope, with this bill going into effect July 1, that we, along with other members of VACO and VML, can track any progress and any issues, with, of course, the hope being that developers, seeing that this is an absolute requirement, would not need stick legislation later and will follow suit. So we'll be tracking it closely, because if there is a problem, obviously it just helps with the argument that we've had for a couple of years. On the public day school funding front, there was lots of money put into the budget this year, not for what we wanted, but for other studies dealing with CSA. There's a study to see what services are provided in the private sector. There is a study to see overall what happens with special education. Most of these are done by the Office of Children's Services, and JLARC will have they're supposed to have their findings due out this fall. The JLARC one is probably the best bet for us. They have our data, thanks to Donna Krause and others for supplying that year after year and updating it for the General Assembly. JLARCS is probably going to be able to provide the greatest answers and hopefully direction for what we want, so it wouldn't be a pilot project. They'll see that school divisions like those in Stafford do the best with the fewest amount of dollars, and parents are very happy having their children educated closer to home and not having to transport them 2+ hours. But unfortunately, we did not get the funding we wanted for the project, but the more we talk about it and the more we work with groups, the more legislators who are jumping on. Senator Suterline from the Roanoke area had his own bill this year. He has never played in this arena with us before, so it's certainly growing, and Stafford is the leader on this topic. Proffer changes, small little bill that, thanks to Stafford getting involved, obviously from the beginning, but when it comes to this new piece of legislation, staff was phenomenal all last summer and fall, right up into session, providing constant feedback. No issue was too small for them to vet and supply answers on, and I will say that while not a perfect piece of legislation, it is much better than, most agree that it is much better than where we were before, and I'd like to commend Stafford County staff, supervisors as well as in particular staff for providing all of that necessary feedback. It was exceptionally helpful to the process. Broadband telecommunication service districts, did I skip? Yeah. Our own Delegate Bob Thomas's bill signed into law, no major amendments done to it. There was some debate, and we've talked about this before, about service providers recognizing that there are needs but not always wanting to fill them, but certainly not wanting others to step into that place. Hopefully we found a level of compromise so that the residents of Stafford County can get what they need, that the county obviously was willing to put themselves out there in front and battle with the telecom companies. But that bill, surprisingly, in the end, had very few, if any, opposition, and we didn't have any amendments from the governor's office. That's not going to be the same as some of the other measures we talk about later. The portable pumps, this is our second year in a row of having a legislative idea mentioning to state agencies that we were willing and very serious about it and would drop legislation, then miraculously they come around and are willing to work and talk with staff about the issue. So we did not actually have to drop legislation, just the discussion of it, and Delegate Thomas being willing to go forward, pressing on DCR and others, we were able to resolve the issue without any legislation. Training standards for SPOs. This bill, towards the end of session and throughout all of veto session, really demanded a lot of time and attention for an exceptional reason. The Stafford County Sheriff's Office was phenomenal in their willingness to come down with very little notice, very early in the morning to testify. The Sheriff's Association came on board. Several other sheriffs as far out as Gate City area signed on in support of the measure, and it really became it became a very politicized issue towards the very end, and so the governor did choose to veto the bill. There is discussion that maybe we can come to some conclusion later, but the governor's office feels very strongly that more requirements, there was legislation to that effect on SROs, are needed, that there is no need for a middle ground, that the two options we have are the best bets for it, for us to be able to protect our schools. Obviously, we disagree with him and his staff on that matter.
Yeah, thank you for that, Julia. And that one just shocked us, I guess. And Meg led a forum out at VACO, and I briefed the audience out there, and it had just overwhelming support from the VACO participants. Countywide, county supervisors from across the state, big counties, little counties, everybody. I mean, you couldn't find people against this. And then, for this to be vetoed, I mean, really, what was the thinking behind this from your point of view, in your opinion, and be as frank as you can with us, because I want this thing fixed next year. I don't want to give up on this.
So the bill, what we originally wanted and what the final bill was, were two different things, but the final bill would have gotten us there. And all it did was direct the agency, DCGS, which already comes up with programming and training, to do something for this middle ground for retired law enforcement. And what the discussion point came is who knows best what to do. They really weren't going to allow us our win. Instead, they would much rather us get behind the governor's ideas about increasing on the SRO end. They didn't really think that there was any reason They hadn't heard, some of the arguments were that they hadn't heard enough from retired law enforcement who wanted to come back but didn't want to do the 18-week program. I mean, I think it was absolutely political. If Senator Stewart had the bill as well. And on the Senate side, when he first testified, there was no opposition to the bill. The Secretary's office popped up while Senator Stewart was presenting on the bill to announce opposition. And as Mr. Dudenheffer will attest to, that is never received very well. But what was the most interesting part about it was Democratic members of the committee were the ones who jumped up and said, this doesn't make sense. Opposition, all this bill is telling DCGS to do is to come up with guidelines. If they don't want to, there's no, to our other bill, no stick on it. If they don't have a desire to, they don't have to. And as we talked about it more, you're right. Support grew within communities, local governments, the sheriff's associations, et cetera. And really, I think the administration just, some of the discussion points you'll hear where there are already too many guns near schools. Do we really need to add more levels of people, or should we just fine tune those that we have there?
So what they're saying, in essence, is the only gun that they want in the school is in the hands of a madman, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I will say, though, there is very strong support to work on this again next year. The coalition, especially once the veto came out, has only grown since then. So to the extent you all choose to do it, I'm already in communications with other groups to see about how we can bring this into, this is a big election year, you may have heard, for the members of the General Assembly. And so certainly many of them are asking why we did this. Can they have more information? And maybe they can incorporate into their own talking points. So while we don't get political, we do supply them information on our agenda. So the next item, a budget item, local real estate tax relief. We've talked about it endlessly about how Stafford, because we have so many veterans, disabled or otherwise, living in our community, and whenever there is tax relief programs, while wonderful to help that population, it disproportionately hurts localities like Stafford, Virginia Beach, others in Hampton Roads. And so we were seeking not to eliminate the relief that was there for veterans, but to have the state kind of recognize the hole they had put us in and try and make it right. This year was not a budget year, it was just amendments to the budget, and this had a very large price tag on it. And so while there was nobody who spoke against the measure, the merits of the measure, it was more a matter of funding. And we had discussed that before, how difficult it is to get that kind of measure in during the beginning of the cycle. Governor Northam will be starting his budget development process this fall. And certainly an item we can try and bring to his attention as he crafts a budget going forward. And of course, the members of our delegation who will be voting on this measure next year. Hydrilla mitigation, your favorite. The VDAX, so we had legislation last year. VDAX came forward and said, please don't put your bill forward. We'd be happy to work with you at putting it on the list. And they have. They're vetting. Hydrilla made it on the list. They're going through the process now. Regs won't be ready until 2020 because that's how long the process takes. But Hydrilla was included. And this is, again, an example of us coming up with a great legislative idea and an agency being willing to fix it before we have to go forward. Widewater State Park, the money was already included in the last 2 years. The state park didn't ask for any more, so there wasn't a need to bring it forward. Timbering regulations, Delegate Thomas's office is working with the Department of Forestry on that matter. Hopefully we'll have an update soon now that session's over. The TDR bill, this was not originally part of our package, but due to great ideas with staff and Delegate Thomas's desire to move forward on it, he did. It was signed into law. The board, at a later meeting, blessed and included the bill in our package, but a wonderful idea from staff that hadn't made it all the way to our forefront is now in the Code of Virginia. So I'll count it as a win. VRS changes for law enforcement personnel. A wonderful idea, but again, much like our other, some of our other budgetary issues, in a non-budget year, it's just exceptionally expensive, and there was no, there wasn't a desire in the General Assembly to sort of upend the existing budget, and this is one of those ideas that's usually considered in the new budget year, so again, this fall going into next session. Again, nobody has a problem with it. It was really the price tag that makes it prohibitive in a non-election year. And then we didn't have legislation on smart scale programs, but there are several studies, one Delegate Cole study and a new one released by patroned by Delegate Bryce Reeves, looking on the 95 corridor and other funding elements to hopefully relieve congestion, because that's one of the few lists we don't like being number one on. There are, not included in our package, but I would like to note, and I'll give to Anthony for distribution, is there are quite a few studies that were put forth either in the budget or legislative studies that Stafford may want to take a role in, either as just staff doing it, or some of you guys might want to participate. Study of such things as fuel taxes and sustainable transportation funding. Obviously, we have the ongoing CSAs. There are other transportation-related projects. Now that the session is done, and we're looking for, the General Assembly is looking forward, these studies will be things that they're looking for. So obviously, any involvement, if there's any interest from members of the board, please let me know, and I can certainly keep you abreast of those issues. There's one item I'd like, or two items, one topic I'd like to mention. We talked earlier about the bill to try, or the budget amendment to try and make Stafford whole when it comes to property tax relief. As you well know, to get one of those initiatives in the Constitution of Virginia, it has to pass twice. There were two that passed this year. They will have to pass again next year, but certainly to stay on our radar. It's a personal property tax exemption dealing with motor vehicles of a veteran who is disabled. Obviously, car tax is a very large issue. It's a hole that the state tries to partially fill, but obviously if there is more, that would be another large hit for Stafford County. It was, the measures were patroned by Delegate Fillercorn on the House side and Senator Reeves on the Senate side. So that's something we'll obviously track going forward, and any data from the county would be very helpful as we hopefully fine tune it so it's not yet another hit to the Stafford County budget. But other than that, if you have any questions.
Any questions? Ms. Bumpy?
Thank you for your
ma'am.
work down here. You've done a great job. Just in the future, and we didn't really bring this to your attention this year, but if you could just keep an eye on the bills that relate to human trafficking. I went down there with a group of women who took that on here in the Fredericksburg area, and as you know, it's a massive, massive business. But we need to do whatever we can in Stafford County to protect our young girls and boys. I've been educated. So anyway, just put that in the back of your mind for next year. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate everything you're doing down there.
Absolutely.
It's
Thank
a
you,
lot of
sir.
work, we know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any additions or deletions? I didn't see any. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as it stands? Have a motion to have a second. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. I have no speaker cards, but now it's time for presentation by the public. It is your opportunity to speak on any subject that you would like before the board. You have 3 minutes to speak. I would ask that when you come to the podium that you state your name and address. The green light will come on. Once the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute, and the red light comes on, means it's time to stop your remarks. With that said, as I have no speaker cards, anyone on my right wishing to address the board on any subject? Seeing none, anyone on my left wishing to address the board on any subject? Mr. Waldowski.
Good. Come on up. Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane in the gerrymandered Rock Hill District. I brought my CUP, and I sat in a sit-down restaurant on 17 today. Yes, Paradise Diner is also there, but it's under new ownership. On my way back from the Waffle House, I thought I'd go down Poplar Road because I love to go through the Heartwood District and find all the potholes. And it's on Mr. Gibbons' residence. He's still working. Can you believe that? He could run for office and, you never know what might happen. But I got to see Lois, and she signed my petition, which was pretty neat. Now, how about that Virginia basketball team? I have all these people who don't understand what a foul is. They think it's a bird, F-O-W-L. And in today's basketball game, even Charles Barkley, if I sat down with him, I could convince him that the Virginia player got touched twice. Even if you get touched when you're invoking a foul, it's a foul because you're trying to give away and be unsportsmanlike, unlike when I played basketball. And you touch someone when they're dribbling a basketball, if you knew how to dribble a basketball, that could result in a double dribble, which he was hit again the second time. So thank goodness that 6 eyes missed it. That's the 3 referees, 2 more from Charles Barkley. Just like the Los Angeles Rams got to the Super Bowl. Amazing. You know, I never knew how to befriend anyone on Facebook, but it was a pleasure to befriend. It's pretty interesting. Now, I just listened to the General Assembly, always interests me. There are no issues, there are opportunities, but you need to bring that up, that you have an opportunity for whatever you're an advocate for. Now, for those of you who are running for election, let me bring up Joe Biden. He's my favorite uncle. He ran for the Senate 7 times. On the 7th time, he ran for vice president. He took the oath of office for 5 days, collected his Senate check, resigned, then took his vice president check. Golly, what a country, huh? I love to see that 50-year thing. You know, that's the beginning of HOAs, Houses of Aristocrats in Stafford County. And if that's a planned community, then it needs to have a mayor. It's got its own fire department, its own sheriff. And I'll see you tonight, because county water and sewer is one of my favorite topics.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room would like to address the board on any issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Report by board members.
Oh, Ms. Bomke?
Yes, good afternoon. I don't have a lot today. I would like to mention that I was invited to a meeting with Supervisor Bravo out in King George that was part of the Water Implementation Plan, also known as WIP 3. And they invited a lot of elected officials that are interested in the protecting our watershed. And I will just say that there were 2 members of staff from the governor's office there. They've traveled all over the state, listening to what elected officials have to say about the WIP 3 program, and they're working with DEQ and EPA on a lot of things, because as we all know, this cost us a lot of money. We've met our requirements for, 2020, but they're always increasing our requirements. The one thing that I did want to share with our county and also with my colleagues is they are now really cracking down on the state of Pennsylvania, because they've always kind of gotten a free ride for the last 10 years. And as you know, everything comes downhill. So now the EPA actually has a separate addendum to some of the requirements that relate specifically to the state of Pennsylvania, which is a good thing, because hopefully that will help reduce some of our requirements in future years. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cavalier?
Thank you. Some of the events I did here in the last couple of weeks is went and participated in the Quiet Harbor Host Lions Club meeting. That organization does a yeoman's job in providing funds to the community for a variety of endeavors, and they've been doing it for a long time, and they're to be commended. I also did an interview with Fox 5 on the school redistricting issue, along with some other members up here, Tom and Gary and Cindy, Meg. We all participated in the Stafford Hospital 5K, which was a big success again this year. I wasn't last, but I think I was last in our group. So,
And Cindy won.
Cindy won. Wow. Gary got an award too for his age group. Yeah.
I'll discuss it when it's my turn.
I also attended the Brook Point High School Inspire Virginia voter registration drive, and you see it on the agenda to do a proclamation. They won the award from the governor 2 years in a row for registering the biggest percentage of, or the biggest number of students in the senior class to register to vote for the upcoming elections. Attended the Stafford, or the Shirley High Middle School Showcase of Learning event, which basically talked about all the different academic programs that they have over there, and it was quite a turnout, and that school is doing very well. And last but not least, I presented the proclamation again to Mr. Percy Pondexter's nephew. He was too sick to attend on Palm Sunday at Oak Grove Baptist Church. We had given him the presentation here, but we wanted to do a special event in his home community, and that was very much appreciated. And to hear some stories about what he's done out there in Widewater is just astounding, and his life accomplishments over his 90-some years now are really remarkable. And that concludes my remarks.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you. It was a busy couple weeks. I attended the Healthy Generations meeting that I'm a member of with the aforementioned group. Did the Stafford Hospital 5K. Several of us, Ms. Bumpke and I, and Delegate Thomas, met with VDOT about some work being done on River Road and Route 3. Went with Mr. Cavalier to Brook Point High School, which was sort of old times for me, about their voter registration. We attended, several staff members and I were fortunate enough to attend a live fire tour of Quantico. It was very nice to have, one of the phrases that's often said at my house is that, well, every time we hear the explosions, it's the sound of freedom. And talking to those young men and women in the Corps, that's how they view it as well. And it's great to see the people who have made defending our country their life's goal. It was great spending some time with them. Mr. Snellings and I went to the Molly Gill Awards. This is a terrific ceremony that our Commonwealth Attorney does. And honoring Deputy Boyle was terrific. I had taught his brother, so I knew of the family, and it's just a really classy, wonderful group of people, and Deputy Boyle deserves a lot of credit. This past weekend, Mr. Snellings and I went to the DARE school system 5K. He actually did it all. I had to run to a ribbon cutting, so I bugged out early. So I give him more credit for that. I thank Ms. Baumke asked me to go to a ribbon cutting for a new gym in the area. Everybody knows how much I love gyms. Triton Fitness is off of Route 1. It's rather appropriately, it was founded by two retired Marines. There are no such thing as former Marines. Two retired Marines are doing it, and it's on Black Drive, which is appropriate. And so people should check it out. It's very nice to see Stafford County bringing in new business, and particularly our veterans. And it's something that I know we're putting a lot of effort on. Attended a HOA meeting at Riverbend last night because they're having issues with groundwater and causing collapsing of their cliffs overlooking the Rappahannock. And then the big thing that was a big part of what I've been doing the last 2 weeks is Student Government Day. I thank again Mr. Snellings. Every year that he has been a member of this board, he comes and spends a large part of his day with these students. There were about 20 students from each of the high schools in Stafford County. Mr. Dudenheffer gave up his time to explain the Armed Services Memorial, and in the evaluation from the students, which we do every year. This year, many of them said that was one of the most important things that they did all day, was learning about our Armed Services Memorial. I do want to give some shout outs to Jeff Shover, Rick Colbert, E.B. Davis, Gordon Terrence, Jeff Harvey, John Palmer, and Logan Chandler, without whom's help I could not have done whatever we did last Wednesday. And lastly, it was very impressive. Two of the young individuals, the county administrator and then one of the board members, are part of our YES program, the Youth Engaged in Stafford. And people remarked on how well they knew how the system worked and how meetings were operated, and the flow of things and how to handle being up on this side of the dais. And It's a credit to our YES program, it's a credit to our staff and the committees that serve with these people and welcome them. And Mr. Harvey's out there. I know he has welcomed Connor Merck greatly as the late person on the Planning Commission. So we are going to be doing the YES program again in the future. So if you have any children that are going to be rising juniors or rising seniors, I encourage you to reach out to the county and get them involved in this excellent process. And that is it.
Mr. Dudenheffer.
I just have a couple of items. We're going to begin our study of a bus service, or I guess we're actually doing a bus service, but we're going to see how it works out. That'll go from the Aquia Town Center parking lots all the way up to the VRE station at Quantico and make a number of steps along the way. There'll be some breaks on the price. What's the exact date it starts? I don't remember. What? May 1st it starts. So, yeah, $1.75 for each route, each way there, and it'll run up Highway 1. We're excited about new bus service that can provide longer runs, but provide and keep more cars off the road, which is always the benefit. In addition to that, on the same type of subject, Ms. Maurer and I met with the representatives from PRTC who are putting in for a grant that would provide for four large bus routes out of the 610 parking lot up into Washington, D.C. and to the Pentagon. We won't know about that till the fall and whether we get that, but that would be fully funded, and it would be a great addition to the commuting options that the people have going up into the city. So those two things are out there. We spend a lot of time brainstorming, trying to figure new ways to crack the transportation nut, and it's we'll never completely solve it, but believe me, we spend a lot of time and effort trying to fix that. So, thank you.
Mrs. Maurer.
A couple of things. Attended the VRE meeting. Of particular item to note, especially here for the Stafford County, North Stafford region, especially, is that there's $109 million in new money for the I-95 corridor. Now, unfortunately, it started with kind of Richmond to D.C. and is now expanded from state line to state line, but we're hopeful, very hopeful, that they focus on the worst traffic in the nation. Let me say it again, the worst traffic in the nation. So we are hopeful that they're going to start making progress. The CTB will be making a decision on that towards the end of the year, which also frees up some money for us to look at some of our more regional projects, if they choose projects within the I-95 corridor that is the worst traffic in the nation. If they focus on that, then it will free up money for other projects that we have in the region that will help with congestion mitigation. Additionally, attended the GWRC and the FAMPO meetings last night. There is also additional money for smart scale. So the Route 3 parking lot has been taken off the table, which is, I don't think it was something necessarily that Stafford County, it was our top priority, and so we are able to disperse that money on more appropriate projects within the region that will help Stafford County homeowners more. In addition to that, we also want to make note that they've changed the dates for submission on the matching funds. And so I just want to make sure that we're tracking that as a staff, and they've also shortened the timeline. One of the things that Stafford County has done well, and why investing in our transportation funds and ensuring that we have money available in the budget for transportation projects, is there are matching funds, dollar for dollar. And so we can take, $1 million here and turn it into $2 million with state matching funds. But I want to make sure that our staff is tracking the changes in submission dates and the shortening of the timeline for submission. Sorry I missed the 5K. You know what? I am finally better. I know I said that 2 weeks ago, but no, seriously, another 2 weeks of antibiotics. I am finally better. But my company, G Cubed, was very proud to be a sponsor of the 5K, and I want to thank all of my board members for welcoming my boss, Vernon. You guys were great. Every one of you stopped by the table. You said hello, and I just want to thank you for being so welcoming to a Stafford County business. That concludes my, final thing, Mr. Chairman, I need to pull item number 1.
Ms. Shelton.
Well, I was going to talk about the Commonwealth Transportation Board, but I'll put that off because I wanted to talk about the Aquia District won the largest turnout at that 5K run. All right? I'm just saying. Remember? Yay, we won. Okay. In addition, because little birdie told me that someone was running up behind me, I was smart enough to to outrun Miss Bomke for the finish line. It wasn't a great finish, but I still beat her. Yay! And so that's whatever is important. So let's talk very briefly about a couple of things that we've done. Many of the meetings, of course, I've attended as well. We do that, and it's really fun to be able to toss around different ideas so we can make sure that we're using things the right way for your money. All of us are really hyper-focused on transportation. Why? What did you say? We're number one. Okay. Yeah, it's awful. And so in addition to that, I've been working on some new ideas that we have to provide broadband to Whitewater State Park as well as for the Aquia District, and then extend those over into other areas. So we're just now in the discussion phase with Mr. Cavalier and I. And then the next thing is to talk about Greenridge. We need 20 more signatures. For those people that understand that Greenridge is a fabulous cut-through, those people that live there are not so pleased. And so they're putting together a petition to put in traffic calming measures. And for those people that live in that area, we need 20 more signatures. You've got my email, call me. I'll help you get those signatures. I mentioned briefly that I went out to Culpeper to meet with members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board to kind of understand some of the changes that other board members have mentioned. That was a beautiful drive, frankly, and there wasn't that much traffic, so that was kind of a pleasure for a change. And then I could talk about the R Board. I think we mentioned it before that we have some concerns about our landfill and our ability to handle some of the recycles that we have. Be aware that there's going to be some changes coming up, and watch out for them. As you know, we have no place to put recyclables, but we don't want to shut down that program because it's so important for our environment. Thank you very much, sir. I have nothing to pull from the consent agenda.
Mr. Snellings.
In the interest of time, I'll defer. Consent agenda, I need a motion for consent, less item 1. Have a
Second.
motion and a second. Cast your votes. Okay. Motion carries 7-0. Ms. Mauer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't have an issue with any of the items. I just want to split out the vote because I did miss the April 9th meeting, and I will be abstaining from that. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the March 19th, the April 2nd board meeting, and the April 2nd budget work session minutes.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Cast your votes. Tally the vote.
Make a motion for 9.
Motion passes 7-0. And now I need a motion by Mr. Cohen. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Dudenheffer. Any discussion? Cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion carries 6-0, 1 abstention. Report of the county attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no report at this time.
Report of the county administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a few things that we'd like to cover with you today that are listed on the agenda. And the first is an update on our Healthy Growth Community Engagement process, which is our strategic priority that we want to just give you an update on. Mike Smith will do that for you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Michael Smith, and I'm the Deputy County Administrator. May I have the computer, please? Okay. On November 7th, the board passed their first strategic plan, and one of their priorities was healthy growth. That was one of their 7 priorities. One of their 3-year priorities was to identify and execute growth management strategies that align our comprehensive plan and infrastructure without impacting our taxation. And that included both incentivizing growth in our targeted growth areas and evaluating zoning outside of our public water and sewer to maintain the rural character. The rural character is also a big part of our comprehensive plan, maintaining that. Plan includes both long-term and short-term activities to try to reach those goals. The board tasked staff with reaching out to the public and getting their input on what is going on and doing research with our comparable localities so that we can come up with strategies to maintain that rural character and incentivize healthy urban growth. On December 11th, we brought a timeline to the board on what we would do with our public engagement. We outlined the process on March 5th and brought you a group of stakeholders, the different groups we would be reaching out to, and we asked for board input and included a few individuals that the board added. We also had originally proposed just large land tract holders of over 100 acres. It was suggested to bring in some people with smaller than 100 acres because there were so few of them, so we did add some smaller landowners on that. The first 2 phases of the public outreach process was held last week. We did interviews with some of the stakeholders on March 8th, and then we did a roundtable discussion with about 23 people on March 10th. We had a morning session and an afternoon session. The stakeholders, as I said, were selected as people that will be most impacted by the healthy growth priorities. A list of the individuals that we provided to the third-party consultant. The third-party consultant called those individuals, and some of them were available, some were not. The ones that were able to attend are listed on the left. We want to be transparent in this process and make sure that everybody understands what we were doing. The interviews were conducted by the consultant. County staff did not stay in the room during those interviews. We wanted to make sure that the people being interviewed felt comfortable that it was third party and it was not being directed by staff. The roundtables were attended by staff, but we did not engage in the conversations. We let the consultant do that so that we could get the input, and it was just basically a listening event. We just wanted to hear what the people had to say. The discussion questions that were put out there were pretty open-ended. They weren't directing anything or leading people. We wanted to make sure that we just had some good, open conversation. I'm not going to read through the discussion or the questions, but they are available for you. It's basically just some open-ended questions to find out what people thought about incentivizing growth and what people thought about our rural character. We will also be holding some public meetings. The dates and times are shown above, so they'll be Monday, April 22nd, next week at 7 p.m. at Margaret Brent Elementary, and then in the South on Tuesday on April 23rd at T. Benton Gale Middle School. This will give an opportunity for the public to come out, whether they're a business owner or any kind of community stakeholder. They can come out. We're going to do a presentation so that we'll do the same presentation that we did for the roundtables with some additional information we garnered from the roundtables, and then we'll break up into groups. Instead of having them just come up to a podium and have their opportunity to speak, we want to have a discussion so we're going to break up and do a similar thing we did with the roundtables. So we'll have several different groups so we can sit and listen to what they have to say. The next steps will bring the information that we get from these public meetings back to the board on May 7th, and we'll have a discussion with hopefully some direction on where we want to go to proceed. Then we'll have a joint meeting with the Planning Commission at the dinner session so that we can talk to the Planning Commission about the things we've learned as well. And then on May 21st, we'll come back to the board with some recommendations for consideration if there's any changes to any ordinances or if there's any other policies that we want to do to meet the board's strategic strategy. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Dudenhofer?
Any surprises so far?
No surprises so far.
So predictable, thanks.
Any other questions, Ms. Baumke?
So how are we getting the message out to the public that we have these meetings coming up? What is our social media?
Yeah, we put
Because
out
my
a-
concern is what happened when we did the comprehensive plan analysis. And we have very low turnout because people they don't know how to prepare, they don't know what to say. So how are we drawing people to these meetings?
Right, we're putting information out on our website as well as doing a public advertising, just putting out a media advisory. We also have our website available so that people can go to that website, see all the presentations that we've already put out there, what we brought to the board, the questions that the consultants asked, and they can make comments on there as well. So if they can't make it to the meeting, they can still provide those comments to us. So we're trying to reach out the best we can. A lot of times people can't get back in time to make it to meetings, so we're using that website as a way to get that message out and accept some comments.
Okay,
We had a separate web page that we created and put up online on Friday last week, where we tried to incorporate the presentations and any information we had to help folks get prepared, so fairly extensive.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is the third quarter financial review. Andrea Light, our Budget Division Director, will provide that.
Computer, please. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Andrea Light, the Budget Director, here with the third quarter review. The increase in real estate exonerations continues to impact our collection projections. Also, our new construction for fiscal year 19 did not come in on budget. It was slightly under. And just to remind the board, any change of the tax rate that may happen tonight will impact our June collections. Consumption taxes continue to provide positive results. Sales tax is projecting about 4% higher than the same time last year, and meals tax is projecting about 5% over the budget. Interest revenue collections continue to outpace our budget and continue to be strong. And both CSA and social services are both projecting slightly under the budget as we continue to hold the 5% appropriation. General fund expenditures are projected slightly under the budget, with vacancy savings projected to meet our budget assumptions of $500,000. Health insurance is slightly under budget. Typically, we would ask the board at about the third quarter to send those funds to OPEB. In our fiscal year 2020 proposed budget, we have set aside $857,000. We have reduced our budget by that amount. This is the amount that's held in fund balance. We'll ask the board to consider holding that until this time next year to ensure that we meet our budget requirements. Due to the revenues projecting slightly under budget at mid-year, the board held appropriation both for social services and CSA, as well for the planned additional public day school for the schools of $285,000. At the third quarter, staff still feels confident that continuing to hold this is the right measure. It's a conservative measure and will provide us a little cushion. The capital projects reserve is required by our financial policies, and these funds are used for future capital projects. At the end of fiscal year 2018, there was approximately $4.1 million. Through fiscal year 19, either through appropriations by the board or projected uses, we come down to a balance of almost 1.5 that is not assigned to any capital project or any future use at this time. The county does hold funds for future use for the school's capital projects. In the 2019 CIP, we identified $2.4 million that could be used for school capital projects fund. To date, $1.8 million has been appropriated. We do anticipate the additional $600,000 to be appropriated. The changes in the financial policy last year also set aside, requires to set aside savings from the private day schools, and we are experiencing that year. So we're anticipating about $100,000 to be able to fund the school's capital projects fund. The fund balance also holds set-asides for the courthouse design and the temporary parking lot in downtown Stafford. Those targeted funds have been set aside and are part of the fiscal year 2020 proposed budget. The
The school's enrollment through March 31 has increased 109 students over their budgeted amount that built their fiscal year 2019 budget. BDOE will be calculating the March 31 ADM, which will provide the final state revenue projections. The schools are anticipating about a 1% savings, and they are seeing their health insurance slightly higher than the same time in the prior year. Gas tax revenue base, because of the gas tax floor legislation, continues to outpace the budget, and we are projecting to have about $1 million over what our fiscal year 19 budget was. Operating expenditures are tracking in line or just slightly below. Utilities revenue continues its manageable and predictable increase. Pro rata is outpacing our budget, and operating expenditures are tracking slightly below. Overall, revenues in the general fund are projecting slightly to be in line or slightly below the budget, and the staff does recommend continuing to hold the 5% appropriation hold for social services and for CSA. The $285,000 that was in the fiscal year 19 budget for the public day school that didn't come to fruition this year can be held in fund balance and used for future use. And our expenditures overall are
Excuse me, Ms.
projecting
Light.
under
Ms.
budget.
Maurer has a question.
Just quickly, the 5% appropriation for social services, they haven't filled the positions that we were allocated to them, so there's some vacancy savings there?
I believe they have, the last I talked to them, they still had maybe 2 positions to hold. But what we're seeing is that they have 100% funded from the state foster funding, that they haven't used some of that. And so there was a few programs like that.
Okay, my biggest concern and the crux of my question is this 5% hold is not hurting their department. Or is it?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, okay, so
No,
the thing
ma'am.
is that their expenditures have not tracked with the budget, and so,
That's correct.
okay, thank you.
Staff does anticipate that we will meet all financial policy guidelines at year end and those fund balance requirements. Are there any other questions?
Any questions? Nope, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Chair, the final item is our construction report from Public Works.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Alex Oziak. I'm the Transportation Program Manager with Public Works. And this afternoon, I'm going to present some updates on the various capital construction projects that are both under design and construction. Our first project on the list here is our new fire station number 14 that is currently under construction. We have experienced some delays on this project on account of the wet weather we've received over the last year, and that's pushed back completion until later this summer. However, the fire department is aware of this delay, and we're pushing our contractor, obviously, to get them in there as soon as we can. Next on the list is the Poplar and Mountain View intersection improvement project. This project is going to seek to improve a sharp curve at the intersection with Cedar Hill Lane. The board recently approved the construction contract award at the April 2nd meeting, and we anticipate starting construction on this project in May and wrapping up construction by the end of this year. Moving on is our Brook Road Safety Improvement Project. This is another project that has been experiencing delays due to the wet weather. However, we are still anticipating to have the road open to traffic by the end of July. The contractor has made some progress with extending the box culverts and constructing a new retaining wall. However, we have encountered some difficulty with the sheet pile retaining wall and conflicts with unexpected utilities. However, working through those conflicts, and we expect the project to be completed by March 2020. For the Garrisonville Road widening project, we had one remaining punch list item to repair some cracking on a signal foundation. I'm glad to report that corrective work is taking place this week. That's going to allow us to finally wrap up this project and start the financial closeout with both the contractor and VDOT. We also are continuing to work with VDOT regarding the permissive left yellow flashing signals along the corridor and are trying to work with them to identify funding to put those signals in place. For the Route 1 Courthouse Road Improvement Project, we are currently still in the right-of-way acquisition phase. We're impacting approximately 29 parcels. So far to date, we reached agreements with 8 different parcel owners. We have authorized condemnations on 3 additional parcels. Right now, we're anticipating probably having to do condemnations on 10 more parcels that have utility easements so we can keep the project on track to begin utility relocations starting in July. Next is the Belmont Ferry Farm Trail Phase 4. The contractor is back on site and working. We recently completed a drainage pipe installation underneath River Road, and the contractor is currently working on dewatering the site and installing the stone base for the trail. For the Belmont Ferry Farm Trail Phase 6 project, we have identified the terminus of the trail, and staff is reviewing the alignment. We're possibly looking at placing portions of the trail within old VDOT right-of-way, so we're trying to work with VDOT on the best alignment options for that. We're also working with VDOT on the pending project to replace the Chatham Bridge. Obviously, this will have some overlap with our trail project, so we're coordinating with VDOT on how to best work out those schedules in overlapping construction zones. For the Juggins Road Improvement Project, this project is underway and under construction. Contractor has finished all clearing out there and is currently working on grading of the roadway and installing drainage structures. We're still coordinating closely with the school contractor who's building the road up there, and we are still on schedule to go ahead and wrap this up by the end of June, so teachers and equipment can start moving into the school. Next is our Berea Church Road Safety Improvement Project. We're getting ready to submit right-of-way plans to VDOT here shortly, so they can review those plans and hopefully provide us with approval so we can start the right-of-way acquisition process. Once we'll start that, hopefully in May or June this year, start off by notifying landowners and start doing appraisals of their property. Currently, we're anticipating impacts to about 28 parcels, however, no relocations as part of this project. Now, moving on to the Route 1 and Woodstock Lane intersection improvement. For this one, public hearing plans, which are about 50% complete, have been submitted to VDOT for review and comment. And we have seen some preliminary cost estimates that have increased the cost on this project, so we are working with the consultant and VDOT to try and do a little plan tweaking to minimize costs on this project and bring it back into budget. And then, as Ms. Maurer talked about earlier, due to some changes in Smart Scale, the Route 3 park and ride lot was eliminated. Some of those Smart Scale funds have been applied to other projects. However, we have been able to acquire the CMAQ RSTP funds that were going to be applied to the park and ride lot and apply them to the Route 1 Enon Road project. Hopefully, this will allow us to start construction earlier than what we had planned with our Smart Scale funds. However, these funding options are still under consideration and have not yet been approved by the CTB.
Just an update, excuse me. CMAQ funding of about $500,000 is right now short on this. That came out last night at the FAMPO meeting. We will need to compete that $500,000 with some other priorities in the region, but I'm optimistic we'll get the extra money so we can go back online with this scaled-down version of the Enon Road project. So, but there is some minor changes that we need to address.
And one other final minor is that the official vote isn't until May 1st. So
Yes.
this hasn't been voted
It
on
hasn't
yet.
been finalized yet. No.
Right. So, but I'm talking about FAMPO hasn't voted on this yet.
Oh, that's correct.
Okay.
Which controls the CMAQ funding.
Right. All right, moving on to some utility projects. Work is wrapping up on the Claiborne Run Sewer Interceptor Line. This project is approximately 80% complete. Again, due to the wet weather we experienced last year, we're about 2 months behind schedule. However, we anticipate completing this project in June. The design for the Lower Accokeek Pump Station has been completed and is awaiting advertisement. Only one outstanding easement is left to acquire, and staff has recommended the use of quick take powers to obtain that last remaining easement. The accompanying Lower Accokeek Gravity Sewer and Force Main project has already been advertised, and bids are due May 7th. And lastly is our Route 1 Wayside Sewer Interceptor project. Again, this is another one. Most of our projects have been suffering with the wet weather here, making the site very difficult to work in. The contractors had to bring in some additional wood matting and stone to help access the site. and is actually using stone and recycled concrete for backfill since the soil is so wet out there. However, we're still moving forward and hope to complete this project by the end of June. And that wraps up my presentation.
Any questions for Alex, Ms. Baumke?
Yeah, Alex, if you can go back to the one on Brook, I thought it was Brook Road. All the others referenced, it says general fund transfer. Was that a general fund transfer, or was that transportation money?
I believe that was a general fund transfer that the transportation fund is paying back.
Okay, all right. That was the only one that said general fund transfer, and I wanted to make sure, maybe we'd do a footnote or something on there, because all the others specifically say transportation fund.
Okay, I'll update that. for
And
the
that
next-
one says county transportation fund, but I thought we did put some money, general fund money, towards this project, but I didn't remember that it was that much.
It was 2.8 million.
Okay, all right.
This is correct. There was a whole lot of debate and drama over this vote.
Yes, okay. All right, thank you.
Any
And
other
I just
questions?
wanted to thank my colleagues for their help on FAMPO with the Enon Road project.
Ms. Shelton?
Go back to that slide, I'm sorry,
Brook
on
Road,
Brook
yes.
Road. Education, what is vinyl sheet pile?
So
And it's
vinyl
breaking.
sheet piling is sheet piling which is used to hold back the soil.
Okay.
Usually they're made out of steel. In this case, for environmental reasons, VDOT kind of recommended the use of vinyl sheet piling. However, as the contractor started driving the sheet pile into the wetland areas, apparently there's a bunch of buried stumps and trash underneath there, and it was pretty much shattering these vinyl sheet piling. So right now, we're working with the VDOT on a possible redesign to go back to using steel sheet pile in lieu of the vinyl.
And so what's the cost increase of that?
Right now, we're not sure of the cost increase. We're hoping it's going to be a zero, if not a credit back to the county.
Okay, if you could let me know, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the Echo Creek, Echo Creek.
I believe we've had some just trouble acquiring the easements necessary to go ahead and move forward with the project, and part of this was to go ahead and get the gravity sewer line work started before the pump station. So there's a little bit of timing issues there as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Alex, appreciate it. Anything else, Mr. Foley?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move on to new business, item number 14, Public Works Code Compliance. Authorize the county administrator to advertise a public hearing to consider adoption of code amendments regarding the vacation of unsafe structures / unfit for occupancy. Proposed resolution R19-116.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Trent Funkhauser, Assistant Director in Public Works Department for Code Review and Inspection, and this is Kerry Jamieson, your longtime building official. We're proposing an amendment to Section 6.1 and 6.16 of the Building Code to provide the building official with the legal ability that many people would assume she already has. Current code provisions address structures that are unfit for occupancy, referred to as unsafe structures. But these present conditions or present provisions, are time-consuming and do not provide the building official with the legal ability to require immediate vacation and to allow authorization for reentry in certain situations. The building official does have the ability to require the repair or removal of a structure, but that's a time-consuming process and it is subject to appeal. So that's a 30-day notice, and again, if you have any appeals. This ability is not effective when you have structures that have been damaged by storms or accidents, car driving into them, tree falls, whatever. In those situations, sometimes we're asked to get family members out, or neighbors are concerned, or other members of the community or members of this board. Staff is requesting this authorization to consider the proposed amendment at public hearing with the hope that the board will eventually approve this proposed amendment and grant the building official, again, authority that many people assume already exists. Such action would free the fire officials from handling occupancy determinations, which they would rather avoid. Even in fire situations, they're not typically equipped to handle the post-declaration discussions, and the building official and the building department are always involved in those types of repairs or demolitions. So again, we're just asking for the board's authorization of a public hearing to provide the building official with authority that, again, this board and a lot of members of the public assume already has. And in those situations when we have to tell people we don't have that ability, again, they're surprised and there's an expectation to do something.
Thank you, Trent. Any questions? Any questions, Ms. Shelton?
I think I asked you this before. Are there any structures right now that are currently under consideration that would be impacted by this decision?
No, ma'am. This is not a proactive amendment, meaning we don't have a list of things that we're ready to go take action on.
Okay.
Again, this would be primarily and predominantly reactive. If again, there's a fire situation, the fire department has that ability, but they'd rather not get involved in these types of things. And we've had that discussion internally. But again, this will be reactive. If there's a storm event, there's a vehicle accident, something happens, and the structures, because we're loath to do that. We don't want to ask anybody to vacate a structure unless we absolutely have to, or again, we're asked by an outside entity or another party that has an interest in the occupants of that structure. We're always going to work with people on repair and other stabilization before we have to actually make that move. This is a last resort type thing.
Okay.
Any other questions, Mr. Dudenheffer, and then Ms. Maurer? Ms. Maurer?
Yeah, I just have a question. You said something, or other people that have interest in the occupants in the structure. Give me an example. That just sounded odd.
We've family members.
Okay.
I mean, if a house is damaged for whatever reason, the roof hasn't been repaired in years, and people, long-distance relatives, I'm just making things up, but, in terms of those types of examples, but those are real examples. I shouldn't say making them up. I'm just using those right here. But, I've seen vehicles run into homes, and people say, well, that's not a big deal. And it's like, well, no, it's kind of leaning at this point. Storm damage is more typical, and usually those are temporary type things. But, that's something that just needs to be worked out. And when there's an expectation that, you've got people, we had a weird situation too, not too long ago, where there was not water and sewer service to a house for some reasons I won't get into. But they were concerned about the occupants because it were people that visited the house, shall we say. And so social services was able to do something in terms of checking on those people, kind of a welfare check. And that situation worked out. But when you have living conditions that contribute to the structure of the house, that becomes fairly odd. Water damage, again, no water and sewer service is technically a code violation. Electrical service gets yanked from a house due to a storm. People say, well, I'm just going to continue to live here. And we can tolerate that for a while, but then it becomes a threat to other people.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Shelton?
How does that become a threat to other people if I'm living in my house on my property and I don't have electricity? How is that a threat to other people?
If you have parents or other relatives that are involved, and for whatever reason, certain people don't want to leave the house, it's also a threat if it becomes a fire hazard and it's a relatively dense location or it's a heavily wooded location. I mean, these are extreme examples, and again, we're only going to take action if we absolutely have to.
Yeah,
But
my concern, you know where I'm going, is just that I could, well, maybe you don't, I'm sorry. The reason I'm asking these kind of strange questions is I'm picturing the individual's property. They have a right to live on that property in any way they want. If I don't want to turn on the electricity, I could live in the dark. I mean, you could. And so I'm like,
Well,
but
again,
yet my
when-
neighbor might not like that.
And again, we're not necessarily looking for trouble, and we don't want to arbitrate neighbor disputes, but if there is a legitimate basis, because of course, every decision of the building official is subject to appeal.
Okay.
Even if we can order them to vacate immediately, we don't want to do that unless we absolutely have to.
Okay, now I said something to Jason, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify real quick that this, we are, and we talked about this a little bit in CEDC a couple weeks ago, that this is, we're trying to narrowly focus this in only for situations where we have a structure that's unsafe, condemnable, if you will, ready to almost fall down from some kind of significant storm damage event, something of that nature. There is no desire nor intention on our part to get involved in perhaps a family situation or matter. Right now, as Trent pointed out, there's limitations on what we can do, but there are some extreme situations where it is a matter of imminent potential danger to somebody where it would be best to go ahead and have that structure vacated. So this is, again, unsafe structures only. We're not, going after folks who don't have water or electricity or something of that nature. Just wanted to clarify that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to send this to public hearing?
Motion for
Mr. Chairman?
R19
Excuse me.
Apologize, this is a new business item.
Oh, that's
So
right,
if the
we
board
can't-
finds it time sensitive, then you can vote on it today.
I don't believe it's time sensitive.
Or if there's no dissension on the board, it can come back on the consent agenda at your next meeting.
Okay, is that acceptable? Just one quick comment concerning this. I'm in agreement with it, but we just had a tragedy in the county 2 nights ago, and this is a prime example of, and I don't know the end result there, but just by what I'm reading and hearing, you probably can't live in that house for a while, so. But anyway, thank you very much, appreciate it. Item number 15, discussion regarding a proposed signal at the intersection of Garrisonville Road and Travis Lane. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you know, the county completed the improvements on 610 recently, and some of those improvements included an entrance into a future development with the garrison. The garrison is tasked with installing a signal opposite of their property on the corner of Travis Lane. They have been unable to come to an agreement with the property owner for acquiring that property. They have asked for our assistance. As this is a new business item, we don't need any action from the board today. We're just looking for some consent that you would like us to move forward so that we can prepare an agreement with Pence so that any costs that would be associated with the acquisition would be paid for by Pence, and then we'll bring that agreement back to you in the future once we have gone through and prepared that agreement.
Any questions? Mr. Dudenhofer, this is your district, so I'll let you take the lead.
Just for education purposes, I'm getting a frown from down on the end of but this is a huge safety issue on the corner of Travis Lane and 610. So you might recall May or June of last year, we authorized a small amount of money from the county to move that project along, but they couldn't come to an agreement even with the extra money. The owner has doubled the price, almost doubled the price, asking price on a little tiny piece to put the pole for a traffic light on the front of his property. So they have asked us to step in, but they will incur all the additional cost if we have any. But they honestly believe the property will be valued at considerably less than what the asking price is. So, but it's important that we move forward with this as quickly as possible. It's definitely a safety issue.
So bring it back to the next meeting on consent.
Yeah, yes, sir. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bumpy.
Okay, that wasn't a frown. I just needed some information, and you provided that, so I appreciate it.
I'm doing my best to keep this Garrison project moving forward at as good a clip as we can, and we're expecting some very good news very soon. So this is just an add-on to that.
Okay, that concludes our afternoon session. I would ask Mr. Dudenhofer if he would motion us into closed session.
A resolution authorized closed meeting, whereas the board desires to hold a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel employed by the board regarding the Transfer Development Rights Program, which is a specific legal matter requiring the provisions of the legal advice by counsel, and whereas pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3711A8, such discussions may occur in closed session. Therefore, be it resolved by the Stafford County Board of Supervisors that on this, the 16th day of April 2019, that it be and hereby does authorize discussion of the above matter in closed meeting.
I have a second by Ms. Mauer. Any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your votes. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. We're in recess till 7 p.m.
Need to read
I
the,
think Mr. Dudenhofer needs to read the motion.
cut me off. A resolution to certify the actions of the Board of Supervisors in a closed meeting on April the 16th, 2019, whereas the board has on this, the 16th day of April 2019, adjourned into a closed meeting in accordance with the formal vote of the board and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas the Virginia Freedom of Information Act provides for certification that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with the law, now therefore be it resolved that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors does hereby certify on this, the 16th day of April 2019, that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, all public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, and considered by the board.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion carries 7-0. We are now recessed until 7 p.m. I would like to ask Scout Troop 850 to come forward, if they would, and just come up in this area, because you guys are going to lead us in the pledge here in a couple seconds. Just right in here. That'd be great. And the flag is right there. And at this time, I'd like everyone to stand. Mr. Cohen is going to lead us in prayer.
Lord, thank you for our many blessings, for family and friends. Please watch over them and touch those whose lives are in need. Thank you for all the freedoms that we enjoy in this great country and the ability to participate and influence our government. Be with those in our public safety and in the military, as well as their families, as they put their lives on the line for us every day. Be with those in Paris as they deal with the aftermath of the crisis at Notre Dame. Lord, may we always treat others as we would like to be treated ourselves. Amen.
Before we get started, on behalf of the board, I would like to express our deepest condolences to the family of Kathy Tyler. Mrs. Tyler was killed 2 nights ago in that horrendous windstorm. She was in bed. A tree fell on her house. So please keep her family in your prayers. At this time, we're going to have a presentation. Mr. Dudenheffer is doing all the presentations today. But the reason he's doing it is because it's for a gentleman that he was in the Marine Corps with. And when he saw his name, he said, I want to do that proclamation. I said, Mr. Dudenheffer, go for it. So
I've been trying to think of ways to embarrass him, so I'd say. I'm joined up here with Ms. Shelton, who is the supervisor from the Acquired District where Cisco, as I know him, lives. You guys want to come up? You can bring your wife if you'd like. She want to be on TV? Come on. And then the scouts that all are going to want to make a presentation too can come up right now too, please. Well, it's a real honor, and when I saw your name, that brought back a lot of memories, and it's a real honor to honor our citizens who have contributed so much to the well-being and benefit of our youth, and it makes a big difference. So Lieutenant Colonel Cividanis here and I served together, but for a long time we were phone mates across 1,000 miles of the United States, and he probably doesn't even know, but he was really a mentor to me, and many days he was able to pick me up off the ground when I thought I was I just about had enough of this United States Marine Corps sometimes. We go through those phases, right? And I replaced him, not that I could, but I replaced him in Philadelphia, and that's where we physically crossed paths at that point. So, and he moved to Stafford, and the whole time we've been here, I've only seen him, I think, one other time. So I regret that we haven't been able to get together more and talk about old times. But I'm really proud to be here. I'm proud to be able to read this proclamation for you. Ms. Shelton will probably have a couple words to say. We'll give you the microphone, but we're also going to have these young guys have a presentation that they want to make to you too. And look at those smiling faces there. So, all right, let me read this proclamation and we'll get along with this. So, a proclamation recognizing Francisco Cividanis for his dedication to Boy Scout Troop 850. Whereas Francisco Cividanis has played many roles in the past 20 years in Boy Scout Troop 850, including parent, scoutmaster, and merit badge counselor. And whereas Mr. Cividanis has helped guide our youth to be productive members of our community and make a meaningful impact in the lives of people around them. And whereas Mr. Cividanis attended many campouts and week-long summer camps, met with troops to make sure merit badges and rank requirements were taught, and that scouts were proficient in those skills. And whereas Mr. Cividanis' gift of his time, effort, and genuine concern for each youth has had an impact on Troop 850, from the time that the scouts participated in their first meeting until the last meeting they attended. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Stafford County Board of Supervisors, on this, the 16th day of April, 2019, recognize Mr. Francisco Cividanis for his 20 years of service to the youth of Boy Scout Troop 850 and the community here in Stafford. So I'm going to go ahead and give that to you.
Thank you very much.
Let Ms. Shelton talk.
Just stand up. It's all about you.
Thank you.
Very quick words. And so I didn't have the pleasure of knowing you all this time, but I really wanted to thank you both for the service that you've provided to all of the United States in your military service and what you've done for the youth, not just in my own district in Aquia, but all across Stafford. We need more people like you. So thank you for setting that mentor and that coaching capability up within our youth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So, but we're going to give you an opportunity to speak here, and then we're going to turn it over to these young scouts. You want to do that first? There you go. Let's speak last. Let me have the last word.
Mr. Cisco, there's not much I could have said up here today because you've left a lot of us speechless. So we took the liberty of finding your old scout uniform because we know how much it means to us to wear this uniform. And so we know how much it would mean to you to see your uniform put up in a place like this. So, Mr. Cisco, I think on behalf of all Troop 850, we just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank everybody for being here, for one, and for this thing here. And as a matter of history, the summer badge here, when I attended Boy Scouts, it was in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, and those are the activities we had to do during the summer. It took me something like 3 years to get all those, but it was worth it. Thank you very much.
A military scout wife, I mean, so she's put up with a lot. You want to come? Just come out here and they'll want to take some pictures or here. You can't get away. I think that can be arranged. Anybody taking pictures? There we go.
Okay. We get one with everybody. Can the guys from back there, can you, okay,
Get the little guys up front. Yeah, the little guys up front.
Okay, great. All right. 1, 2, 3. That's great.
Thank you, Cisco, for your service. Thank you. I appreciate it always.
We're now to time for public presentations. Tonight's public presentations, you can speak on any subject unless it is an item that is up for public hearing. And we do have 2 items on the agenda for public hearing. When you come to the microphone, I would ask that you state your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to speak on any subject you desire. When the green light goes on, it means start. The yellow light is you got about a minute left, and the red light means your time is up. I do have 3 speaker cards. The first speaker card is Christian Peabody.
Dear members of the board, good evening. My name is Christian Peabody. I am the music teacher at Falmouth Elementary, and I am the president of the Stafford Education Association. And I want to take a moment to thank the board for your dialogue with us throughout the day today concerning the tax rate and the consideration of the school board's budget request. I understand and share your frustration with not being able to engage with the division today during the work session about concerns with the budget and options that were available to us. You have continued to seek SEA's engagement these last 8 months as the division's professional advocacy body, and I deeply appreciate that. That being said, I'm very proud of the advocacy that the board members engaged in to secure and prioritize a universal 5% raise for every county employee this afternoon. If you remember, educators and community members flooded these chambers not too long ago and spoke in overwhelming support of a tax rate that delivers increased funding for all public sectors here and supports a 5% increase for all. And they are even willing to pay it as well. They said that very loudly. There is no imposition by anyone, including us, who qualifies for what, because it's taken every employee in this division to keep it afloat at this point. And nor is there ever any differentiation by SEA on who should deserve what, and the specific reason is that in our professional opinion, as the professional advocacy body for educators, and by educator, we mean everyone who receives a paycheck from Stafford County Public Schools. Every single one of these individuals is recommended for a 5% increase. This is a remarkable opportunity that the board has before it as well. And it allows for the county to continue to strengthen its desire to recruit and retain highly qualified public servants. This board also commented this afternoon on the need to take actions which mitigate the turnover of the public services that we're seeing. Mr. Cohen and I have used the term a lot today. He used it well today, is the hemorrhaging that's occurring. And that term, hemorrhaging, was the genesis of the SEA's Universal 5% Plan for All nearly a year ago, developed by educators for educators. And I believe Mr. Cavalier was also the first one to publicly endorse that plan as well. By adopting SEA's recommendation and now also applying it to the entire county, employees will be empowered and uplifted in an unprecedented way as the stewards of this community. Even if that's achieved through a resolution or not, it's a move that will set a new standard of accountability and excellence, which will help set this county a mark above the rest. Nothing could go wrong with securing 5% for everyone, no matter what happens today. There's nothing that could go wrong. It could only do immense good. That's never happened before, really. Last year, as we stated, we lost over 400 educators, and they're watching tonight if that 1% is going to keep them here or not. Thank you for your time and your engagement.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker card is Robin Gardner.
Hi, I'm Robin Gardner. I'm the Union Server Director that services Stafford, Fauquier, and Fredericksburg. I want to talk to you about the sheet that County Administrator Tom Foley passed out to you, and I specifically want to address Fauquier County. I represent them as well, and last Tuesday night, their budget actually included, it was included a 2%, but what they did was a salary compression. And so I also want to point out that Fredericksburg is not listed here. The school board has passed 5%, and 5% is before the city council and looking to be approved. So I don't want Fredericksburg because we often have times that people jump to Fredericksburg. So, but let's talk about Fauquier. So what they did in Fauquier was they did a salary compression. And who will benefit from that salary compression is the exact population that you could possibly lose here in Stafford. So years 10 to 30 are looking at an average 8%. Some of my members there are going to gain a 15% pay increase. So I want you to fully understand this chart before you vote. And lastly, SEA specifically named our campaign No Ifs, Ands, or Buts, 5%, because so many times we've seen parts of the county pitted against each other, whether it's paras, bus drivers, nurses, teachers, administrators. So SEA voted no ifs, ands, or buts, 5% for all. So I'm asking you to please support 5% across the board for all Stafford employees, whether it's firefighters, whether it's sheriff's deputies, and the school administrators. Please, let's do an amazing thing tonight and get this 5% passed. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My next speaker card is Bill Johnson Miles.
Hello, my name is Bill Johnson Miles, and I live at 121 Kimberwick Lane in the Griffiths-Whitewater District. I'm the secretary of the Stafford Democratic Committee, the second vice president of the Stafford NAACP, and a member of the board of trustees of my church, and I'm also a 20-year retired Navy veteran. Every time I drive south through Stafford County on I-95, I see this huge sign just before the Garrisonville Road exit that says Jefferson Davis Highway, next exit, and it just rattles me. What a way to welcome folks to our county. Why do we still have a primary highway in Stafford County that honors a racist traitor who led the fight to take up arms against our nation in order to preserve the savage system of slavery? We still live in the terrible legacy of slavery, the ruthless and once legal system of terror that represents America's greatest shame. It's outrageous that we still honor the man who led the horrible Confederacy effort, killing more Americans than all wars combined. To have a highway named for Jefferson Davis is a slap in the face to those whose ancestors were slaves in this county. It's time we change the name of that portion of Highway 1 named after a traitor. Other locations are changing the highway's name. Last year, the Alexandria City Council unanimously decided to rename their portion of Jefferson Davis Highway to Richmond Highway, and that name change took place January 1st. Yes, I know that several years ago, the Attorney General's office issued an advisory opinion saying city governments had the power to rename state highways, but county governments did not. But it seems that Arlington County has found a way around that decision. Their portion of Jefferson Davis Highway could be renamed this summer thanks to the discovery of a loophole in the state law and a legal opinion from Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring, who said the name change does not need approval from the General Assembly. Instead, the Commonwealth Transportation Board has authority to rename sections of Jefferson Davis Highway if the county makes such a request. Arlington County has made that request, and it's time that Stafford County did the same. It's 2019, folks. It's not post-war, post-Civil War 1865, and it's not 1922 during the Jim Crow era when the United Daughters of Confederacy made the original name request to honor Davis. We live in a post-Charlottesville time, and the vast majority of Stafford residents no longer want to honor the Confederacy atrocity or the racist legacy of Jefferson Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. My next and final speaker card is Rebecca Musso.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Musso, and I live at 55 Ironmaster Drive in the Hartwood District. Obviously, I am an educator. That's why I'm wearing my red for ed, but I'm not here just to advocate for the 5%. Of course, I approve of that, but also as a constituent and taxpayer and parent of students in the county. I would like to first acknowledge that I understand your roles as supervisors are very many, and there are many things over which you govern. And choosing the $3 will make a significant impact in many facets of how you govern Stafford County and how you fund the areas of Stafford County, and I appreciate that very much. I understand also that when we compare Prince William or Spotsy, that it's not always congruent because they have so much more commercial areas which can provide revenue as opposed to just increasing property tax. That being said, I would like to advocate for my students and say the $3 will give my students more opportunities, will give them smaller class sizes, more access to better teachers because they don't have to spend so much time classroom discipline and so forth. So the $3 will really go a lot further than just the 5%, but will increase the education for all of our students. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speaker cards I have, so I'll see if anyone else in the audience would like to speak. Anyone on my right would like to address the board on any issue except a public hearing issue? Seeing none, anyone on my left wish to address the board? Yes, ma'am, please come on down.
Good evening. I didn't prepare any formal remarks or anything. I just kind of wanted to come up and reiterate the things that you heard from before. I won't go.
Excuse me, could you state your name?
Carol
and address?
Medawar, and I live in the George Washington District.
Thank you.
I just kind of thought, I've been sitting there sort of thinking about what maybe you haven't thought of, and I know a lot of what you guys spend time talking about is economic development and bringing businesses here. And if you want to have that happen, then you're going to have an educated workforce. And so getting that economic growth and those things that you're thinking about, I know that there's talk of e-commerce coming and things like that. Those are students that are going to need to be trained in things like robotics and coding and programming. And those are things that you want them to be able to get right here in Stafford County in the schools that they're attending. And so if you want to fund those kinds of things so that you can grow your workforce and the development and the economic prosperity here in Stafford County, you need to kind of also think through that lens, because if you are able to do that, then you're going to not just encourage people to move here and buy houses, but encourage them to live here, work here, and thrive here, which actually, incidentally, was the theme at Fauquier County Schools, which when I was a Stafford County teacher, I left to go to Fauquier, and a previous speaker mentioned that you often lose teachers to that, and I can attest that that's where I went. And so that was a huge jump in my salary then, and if they're increasing, which I just heard that they were, that would be something that would be very attractive to teachers that are living here. So and I want you to think about that economic development, because when employers are looking to come here, they're thinking about the workforce, right? They're thinking about those kids that are coming out of those schools here in Stafford. And if they are thinking about them being trained and where they want to come to, then maybe they'll choose Stafford. So I just want you to think about it through that lens a little bit. And also, if you do lose another huge majority of your teachers, and we continue to deteriorate, what that does to property values and what that means for the revenue that you get as well. So it's just all this cycle. So really and truly investing in our schools is good for economic prosperity.
Thank you very much. For someone that didn't prepare, you did quite well. Anyone else on my left would like, please, come on down, sir.
Shocking. Good evening, Matthew Lentz, 14 Marshall Place, 22405. Tonight I'm talking to you about retention. Again, it was mentioned earlier that we are hemorrhaging educators at our schools. And so that was one of our main points of the Red for Ed movement, and I'd like to talk to you about that tonight. It's no secret that educators have left our county over the past few years. Some have even left the profession entirely due to the increasingly overwhelming responsibility that we have to burden as educators, and as well as the lack of funding we have seen in our schools. We see this budget as an excellent first step to retain our educators and urge you to support it. We want only what is best for our kids, and in our opinion, what is best for our children, our future, is consistency. Children need consistency. I have students asking me if I will be at Colonial Forge next year. This makes me sad because it reveals how the past 10 years and the lack of funding in public education have resulted in this insecurity in our students, where students don't have the consistency they need, which can lead to so many other problems in our schools and in our community. Students love being able to see familiar faces year after year. Students perform best when they have a positive and safe environment that is conducive to learning. We wish to work together with you to offer our students the best public education we can offer, and we can't offer this without our educators. We can't offer this if people are miserable in their positions as a result of being overwhelmed and underpaid. Yes, we love what we do, but we also can't keep going on without some positive change. Fund our schools, fund our future, retain our staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on my left wishing to address the board? Yes, sir.
Just to be clear, one of the two major public hearing things wasn't on the tax rate, right? Just to be clear?
That's correct.
Okay.
So if you want to speak on the tax rate, you're welcome to do it now. Just state your name and...
Yes, sir. David Sousa, 3 Barlow House, Court 22554, and a student at Colonial Forge High School. Good evening, members of the board. I understand I'm giving my opinion on an issue that I'm not yet a stakeholder in, but the key word is yet. Soon, I will inherit the tax rate, and I would like to give my stance before I do. I believe I advocate for Staffordians when I say this. So long as the tax rate is reasonable, it matters not what it is, but if it is well spent. If our teachers are going north for higher pay, I request the additional funds not be spent on new fields, buses, etc. Give the teachers the pay that they deserve. The fact they've stayed here this long should mean something. New fields and buses will be useless if there's no one to man them after all. Yet a tax rate hike makes sense if a large percentage of the residents that live here for our great schools. No good thing is free in this world, so let's not act as if our schools are. If my basement flooded in a storm, of course I would spend the money to repair it. The same should go for our schools. If we need extra funds to keep our great teachers here, we should give them the money. Common sense if you moved here for the schools, as my family did in 2013. That being said, addressing the counter-argument of cleaning up our budget, yes, we should. I read in an article that stated only 4% of our school buses have air conditioning and that the rest are being retrofit. Forgive potential ignorance, but to my knowledge, AC has been a feature of motor vehicles for decades, and I don't understand why the decision was made against purchasing buses with air conditioning. However, I understand that this decision lay with our school board. I just don't want this additional money to go to waste, as the stated $1.6 million did in the retrofit decision. Another great example of misused money would be in considering a second culinary arts kitchen at another high school. Our teachers are struggling to make a living, and we're considering another kitchen? I'm in support of the rate hike, if and only if the money goes to for a raise for our teachers and our school bus drivers. This will hopefully act as a message to them stating, we understand and that we are going to help. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a bright future, young man. That's probably the most sensible argument I've heard all through this whole process. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to address the board on any subject?
I'll teach you about common sense in just a minute. Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane in the gerrymandered Rock Hill District. For the scouts out there, the scout motto is be prepared. I'm always prepared. Today, this afternoon, we had a nice assembly update, and I heard the word Anthony. I don't know if she was referring to the old county administrator, but I'm a pretty good listener because listen and silent have the same letters in them. As far as common sense in the Commonwealth, it's not common. You want common sense? Move to New York. It's one of the 46 states. As for bus drivers, you all need to know every one of those board members makes more in a stipend than a school bus driver. But what do I know? You want positive change. I always wonder if I have to be prepared, but today there was a report from the county administrator about healthy growth community engagement update. And I want all you citizens to know that the board got to pick who the stakeholders are. Well, you know what steak is for the Commissioner of Revenue? Is it round steak, T-bone steak? He's going to do your assessment based off hot dogs, steak, and caviar. What an analogy. Now, the stakeholders, for those of you who don't know, Monday I'll see you at Margaret Brent on 4/22. No, I think it's 4/23 at 7 p.m. Maybe I marked it down wrong. I guess I wasn't prepared. But I still am trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Now, let's talk about some other aspects that are out there. You know, there's a commercial corridor on 610, and that's where Gary's Car Wash is going to be connected to another car wash not that far from McDonald's. And there's potholes from McDonald's down to Park Ridge, and there's potholes, which I haven't reported yet, coming the other way into the gerrymandered Rock Hill District. But then again, you know, I'm retired, so I have time to drive these rotten streets where there's sidewalks to nowhere. It just amazes me how many closed minds there are, and you need to all realize that an independent has an open mind. And a closed mind, I can tell you right now, as far as the tax rate is, you got to get 4 of them, because 3 of them are already going to say no. And that's the reality. Welcome to politics. It's everywhere. If you missed earlier today, Joe Biden was my favorite politician, ran for the Senate 7 times, took the oath for the 7th time, then turned it down 5 days later, became the vice president. Thank you, Uncle Joe.
Thank you, sir. Just clarification, County Administrator. The board did not pick the stakeholders, did we? So if it did, I didn't get a vote in it, so.
No, Mr. Chairman, as we covered with you earlier today and at other meetings, we identified representative groups that had an interest in the issues that we were talking about, and we reached out to those groups for names and suggestions of who would be their best representative to be at the roundtables. The board had suggested a couple names in addition to a larger group that they thought would be good citizen representatives, but no, you effectively did not select all those folks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on my left or anyone else in the chamber like to address the board on any issue? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Item number 16, public hearing, utilities. Consider a rate increase in the county's water and sewer fees. Proposed ordinance 019-27. Come on down, Paul.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Paul Sante, Assistant Director of Public Works for Customer and Development Services. The Customer and Development Services Division for Public Works oversees the budget and utilities billing, which is why you see me up here tonight, but I can't rule out a little assistance from Mr. Towery during the presentation if need be. So without further ado, if I could have the computer, please. Again, item 16 on the agenda tonight is to consider a rate increase in the county's water and sewer fees. So just a quick overview of the schedule that led up to tonight's meeting. But first, as a quick refresher, the 1.5% proposed rate increase is in accordance with the board-approved Utilities Fund fiscal policy, which was established back in 2010. One of the main objectives in the fiscal policy is to maintain reasonable and well-justified levels of rates and fees. Also considered during this process is the Consumer Price Index provided by the U.S. Department of Labor. The Consumer Price Index represents, on a national level, basically goods and services that are purchased. And among all those categories, government-charged user fees are considered those goods and services purchased. So for perspective, the average percent price change of goods and services since January of 2018 has been an increase of about 1.8%. Back in November, staff introduced the proposed rate increase to the Utilities Commission during the 5-year financial plan presentation, and then introduced the rate increase to the board back in December. The Utilities Commission recommended approval of the 1.5% rate increase on March 26th. And of course, we have advertised the rate increase leading up to tonight's public hearing. For a quick background and analysis, so establishing rates and fees annually is in conjunction with the Utilities Fund fiscal policy and is considered good accounting practices. There are obviously multiple factors to evaluate and recommend user fee rate increases. And below on the slide below are in no particular order, but all are just as important as the other. So for example, our department consistently provides certain levels of customer service, whether it's our field operations team repairing water main breaks in the middle of the night, or our meter technicians assisting homeowners with line leaks, or some of our customer service associates answering phone calls and replying back to emails on a daily basis. These customer service levels remain in high demand, and our expectation is to continue providing these same service levels. Water sales per household is continuing the trend of decreasing and only recently now leveling off. Water and sewer customers are still closely watching their consumption and budget, which does impact our overall budget and our projections. Our current sales and consumption only now matches those from back in 2011. And as far as debt service and maintaining cash reserves, another aspect of the Utilities Fund fiscal policy is to pay down debt and maintain 150 days of cash reserves. This will ensure that we can sustain certain operations and maintenance responsibilities and not bankrupt the Utilities Fund. Regarding maintaining service levels, so as we outlined back in November and in December, the department's user fees that are collected fund the day-to-day operations and maintenance costs of the system infrastructure. So as a metric, we use FY18 numbers. We reported about 703 miles of water line, 537 miles of sewer line, and over 5,800 hydrants that our team actively maintains and operates. Since those presentations back in November, however, we've already added another 6 miles of water line, which was about 1 foot of pipe every 5.5 minutes, 7 miles of sewer line, which is about 1 foot of pipe every 4.5 minutes, and an additional 149 hydrants, which is about 2 to 3 new hydrants every day. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 hydrant every 2 to 3 days. As I mentioned earlier, customers have the expectation for continued customer service level demands, those demands being safe, efficient, reliable, and uninterrupted. And it is our intent to continue to meet that expectation. And also, system growth and aging infrastructure will continue at a consistent basis, which is why our 5-year plan relies heavily on 3R in order for us to keep up with the demand and continue with those high-quality services. The next slide here shows a couple things. The first is a quick chart that shows our account growth since February of 2018, which is 2.66%. That is in line with our year-to-year average of about 2.5% to 3.5% per year. Below, there's some description there about our customer account growth and that it increases year over year. But it's important to note that the department has now only somewhat matched the distribution from 2011, which I mentioned earlier. Basically, our sales are not keeping pace with our account growth. The line graphs here, in a perfect world, total account versus our water distribution would more or less continued on that same pattern trend. But as you can see, our distribution has been very volatile. The volatility is in part due to a number of reasons, customers being more conservative with their water use. There's appliance efficiencies out there, different technologies, and of course, just an overall more efficient usage of water per household. Regarding debt service and our cash reserves, establishing certain rates and fees ensure that in each fiscal year, net revenues are greater than or equal to 100% of our total debt service. So as we continue to add projects in our CIP, so will the need to potentially accumulate debt. Operating funds only cover operating costs, so it's important to increase revenues to support debt service as well. Also, per the Utilities Fund fiscal policy, an operating reserve is required and must be equal to 150 days of annual maintenance and operation, which I mentioned before, to meet both predictable and unforeseen needs, as well as enough capacity for our 3R projects. So what this next slide does is show what the impact will be on our customers' bills and what they may look like overall. Our typical residential consumption is about 6,000 gallons per residential home. That's a four-person household. The screenshot of this bill under the current charges is $88.98. So if we were to implement the 1.5% user fee rate change, that bill will now go to $90.31, or a difference of about $1.33. So what are our peer localities doing? Most of our comparative localities are experiencing these similar trends, and of course are either increasing their rates or some of their service charges within their FY20 respective budgets. The chart to the right is showing that Stafford County is right in the middle. We remain competitive with, again, using the same 6,000 gallon usage threshold. But one detail in this chart is the $90.31 for Stafford County and the $76.59 we're showing for Spotsylvania County includes our proposed user fee increase. The other localities and their costs on those bills do not include their user fee increases. So theirs could potentially be an increase over what we're showing on that chart right now. So basically, in summary, the proposed rate increase allows us to maintain service levels as those demands continue to increase. The proposed increase is in line with our fiscal policy. The consumer price index average cost increase deters us from any large one-time increases in the future, and obviously we compare well with our peer localities. Staff recommends approval of 01927. And please disregard that last statement. That's a leftover from the Utilities Commission presentation. I apologize for that, but you can just disregard that, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions for you.
Do we have any questions? Mr. Cavalier.
Refresh my memory, did we not just have the last 3 years 9% increases each year? Was that where it was?
That is correct.
9% per year for 3 years continuously.
Correct. I'm only recently being updated on some of the historical knowledge of that.
And I understand why we did that, but I'm still not thrilled that right after we got 3 straight 9s, we're asking for another increase. I understand the logic of spreading it out over time, but we really didn't anticipate seeing an increase right after doing 3 straight 9% increases. So that troubles me, to tell you the truth.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think probably good for Jason to clarify that, because I do think it was established that we would, after the 9%, then move on a regular basis to avoid large increases in the future.
Tower.
Yes, that's correct. So the 9%, as referenced, Mr. Cavalier, were historically to catch up for a long time where the utility rates were not increased. So now that we've caught back pace with our comparative localities, the intention here is to continue with yearly increases in line with the utility policy or the rate policy, so as to avoid any potential large increases like that in the future.
And is it correct that that's established in a policy?
That's
in place?
correct.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Mr. Towery or Mr. Santee, just checking in the chart, where would farms be for those of us in South Stafford which still have active farms? Would they qualify under family or under non-residential?
It would typically, I would say, family. I mean, that would typically be like just we don't, yes, we don't typically distinguish those differently.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Paul. This time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Once again, I'd like to remind everyone to please stick to the subject, which is the utility rate increase. When you get to the podium, you have 3 minutes. When you state your name and address, the clock will start. Green light means go, yellow light means you have a minute, and the red light means your time is up. So anyone on my right wishing to address this in a public hearing? Seeing none, anyone on my left? Yes, sir.
The glass half empty or half full? I'll wear it this way for TV. Paul Waldowski, 8 Pickett Lane. I'll stay on subject. I will send you the stakeholders aspect. I am prepared. It was neat to see the bill up there, $88.98. The only thing that was missing was 8 Pickett Lane. Looked exactly like my bill. Now, there's no reason to have a rate policy. It's called people, process, policy, and it's usually people, process, product. And we already give these utility directors over 100K salaries. So let's bump it up so we can give them a little more. Yes, I have tankless hot water heaters in both my rental and my place because I'm smarter than a 5th grader and I don't boil my water all day and then wash myself with the dirty residual of the rust going down that big tin can of what's going on. I love that you have meter technicians. 200 Chesterfield Lane, apartment 301. Michael Stonehill put in water lines. We still have meters that are out of date, and we don't get a county water and sewer bill. Therefore, if you're going to have an increase, then you need to give us a county water and sewer bill. Don't tell me about sales and account growth. Your numbers are fake news. As a matter of fact, the county administrator once again brought in the 3rd quarter financial report, and I don't have the specifics, but the utility department was doing just well. Also, for all you citizens to know, we're the only county of the 95 counties in the Commonwealth, it's not the state of Virginia, it's the Commonwealth of Virginia, that has utility commissioners. Thank goodness they don't get a stipend in. They waste our money doing public hearings because they rubber stamp everything that's going on. There's no need for that. It was originally established by a 4-time supervisor who I tried to see earlier today, but he's still working. I guess he doesn't need supervisor stipends anymore. This is one of my really big pet peeves in this county. People don't realize there's people who live payday to payday in that subdivision, which I renamed from Stafford Meadows to Stafford Ghetto. I've had my unit empty since December 23rd when I let a TBS student out of the lease so he could move on his way. And I'm willing to leave it empty until I get another one because we already contacted the HOA attorney after I already spent $100,000 of my own money trying to get a county water and sewer bill. Hopefully, we're going to get it. If not, I have a trust, and if I go away, I got Where's Waldo? He works for Netflix in L.A.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience like to address the public? Yes, sir. Please come up.
My name's John White, and I'm down on the Cason Road. The water and sewer fee increase was very interesting, and a lot of my family there still have wells because there are no sewer lines from Wildcat Corner to Route 3, which is a distance of approximately 1/2 mile. And I'm just wondering if these rate increases will allow sometime in the future to have water and sewer running from Wildcat Corner to Route 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. White. Anyone else in the audience would like to speak concerning the public hearing on rate increases for water? Seeing none, I bring it back to the board. What's your pleasure? First of all, let me close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I guess nobody else is jumping at it.
I'd like to make a motion.
Ms. Shelton?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we set the rate to 102. And,
No.
no, I didn't think we were, so I was ready, though.
This is proposed.
Water, sewer, yeah, I was
proposed-
ready for that.
This is proposed ordinance 019-27.
Thank you.
Do
Sorry.
I have a motion for or against?
I would like to make a motion to defer this, because I would like to talk to my farmers and make sure that they're okay with this jumping up to that dollar amount.
Hold on 1 second. Did you say 019-27?
That's what I'm looking at, proposed ordinance 019-27.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something different. I apologize.
I have a motion to defer. Do I have a second? Hearing no
Second.
Second by Ms. Mauer. I would ask how long you want the deferral?
2 weeks?
3
Or
weeks?
3 weeks, to our next meeting, the first meeting in May.
I have a motion and a second to defer until the next meeting, which is 3 weeks from now. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ms. Bumke.
is there, do we have to vote on it tonight? Is it like?
sensitive.
Good question.
Time
Is
sensitive.
this time sensitive, Jason?
No, the utilities budget is set based on the 1.5%, so we would ask that that be acted on before the budget would be set, of course.
Okay. So it doesn't need tonight, okay? Yes,
So,
go ahead.
Well, it does. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Just
you.
let's Ms.
Yeah,
Ms.
I was just going to say that I feel like we've known about this 1.5% increase since we discussed the 3 years of the 9%. So, you know, our financial advisors have definitely informed us about this over the last 4 or 5 years and indicated that it would probably go down to a level like this. So I guess I'm not surprised, but and if others would like to defer, I'm not opposed to that.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cohen?
I'm not so much surprised, and I understand where you're coming from. I just, with all the focus on something else this evening, and loads of people are looking at the other issue that we're talking about this evening, I would just like time to shift gears to tech with some other people on this other element, which is not what most of the people here are for tonight.
Any other discussion? Ms. Shelton?
I just wanted to remind you that the dollar figures that we've figured for this particular increase are in the proposed budget that we're looking at tonight. And so that's why deferring it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, based on what I'm seeing, I doubt very seriously we vote on the budget tonight. But we can always amend it, is that correct?
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, we are counting on that revenue beginning July 1.
Correct.
So if you defer for a few weeks, we'll still be okay to meet
I
those.
guess Ms. Shelton's concern is if we vote to pass the budget this evening, it would include this increase, but we haven't passed the increase, but we can go back and amend the budget at our next meeting, is that correct?
That's correct, and it also depends on what you act on tonight. 'Cause we
Correct.
can defer the actual approval till later.
Okay. Is everybody clear? Any other discussion? I have a motion to defer to the first meeting in May. Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 5-2. Item number 17, Finance and Budget, authorize the Virginia Public School Authority, VPSA, debt proposed resolution R19-73. Ms. Light.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Andrea Light. I'm the budget director here at Stafford County. Tonight, the board is holding a public hearing to authorize the VPSA debt that would be issued in fiscal year 2020 and consider the proposed resolution R-1916. Authorizing the debt does not bind the board or appropriate the funds. We'll bring back items individually to be appropriated and the debt to be authorized in time with contract. The projects that would be considered for VPSA, which are in the CIP, are the Ferry Farm School rehabilitation, repair of the exterior envelope at North Stafford High School, repair of the track at Mountain View High School, and Rock Hill Elementary School mechanical system. Are there any questions?
Do we have any questions for Ms. Light? Thank you very much, Ms. Light.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
one point of clarification to make sure the board's on the correct resolution. We show resolution R-1996 as the
That's what I
proposed
thought.
resolution in front of the board.
Okay.
Well, I've got the wrong agenda.
I apologize. I
I'm
believe it's
sure it's
misnumbered on the agenda.
R-19-73 is what I'm showing on this.
And that's actually misnumbered on the agenda. It should be R-19-96.
-96, okay, thank you.
That's why I asked you to repeat.
Thank you very much. Thought maybe I was
Mr.
losing my mind up here.
Oh, it's a
Okay,
public hearing.
since there are no questions from staff, I'll now open the public hearing. Public hearing on finance and budget, authorize the Virginia Public School Authority debt. Anyone on my right would like to address this issue? Seeing none, anyone on my left? How did I get the wrong agenda? That came from
Someday you'll give me a signature, even though you're Polish. Paul Waldowski, 8 Picken Lane. Sounds to me with these proposed resolutions, you need to be prepared. Oh, that's that scout motto. I'm really sorry. I keep repeating myself. This is one thing I am totally in favor of, because I'm in favor of anything that improves education, education, education. Even if it's in the town of Aquia or the town of Falmouth. Gerrymandering's coming, 2021.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the audience like to address this subject at public hearing? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion
I
for
have a-
approval.
I have a motion
Second.
for approval for R-19-96. I got it right that time. Ms. Bomke is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to unfinished business, number 18, finance and budget. Authorize calendar year 2019 taxes and authorize the Lynn Haven Lane Special Service District tax rate. Proposed resolution R-19-71, tax rate 103 per 100. Proposed resolution R-19-90, Lynn Haven Lane, 20 cents per 100. I'm sorry. Mr. Foley, do you have any presentation to make, or?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think we're just building up from that work session this afternoon.
Okay.
The only thing that you could consider doing is considering R-1990 first, if you wanted to.
Okay, we'll consider R-1990, Lynn Haven Lane. Ms. Maurer, that is your district, correct?
And I was going to split these votes, so I appreciate that, Mr. Foley, and get this one out of the way. I would like to make a motion for approval for R-19-90.
I have a motion, I have a second by Mr. Dudenhofer. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. Moving back up, resolution R-19-71, CY 219, tax rate 103 per 100. Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir, I'd like to make a motion.
Ms. Shelton?
I'd like to make a motion to set the tax rate at 1.02.
Ms. Shelton has made a motion to set the tax rate at 102. Do I have a second? Hearing none, the motion fails. I'm sorry, did I hear something down there?
Wait a minute. I'll section it for discussion purposes.
I have a motion by Ms. Shelton and a second by Ms. Bomke to set the tax rate for the coming fiscal year at 102. Any
Mr.
discussion? Ms.
Mr.
Mauer.
Chairman, I make a,
Substitute.
substitute motion. Thank you very much. To approve the tax rates as advertised with the exception of setting the real estate tax rate to 99 cents.
I have a motion and a second to set the tax rate as at 99, the real estate tax rate at 99 cents, which would mean no increase. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Mr. Cavalier?
Are we going to send a resolution to the school board stipulating, like we did last year with the raises in conjunction with this tax rate, or is that part of the budget?
Part of the budget.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, I have great consternation about this, because and we did this afternoon, but my concern is that at a 99-cent rate, we are going to still be hemorrhaging employees. We have, and from talking to the sheriff, we have lost, or will have lost by the beginning of May, a dozen deputies. From talking to Fire and Rescue, by the middle point of the year, we may well be at the same point. I know that Mr. Foley has done an excellent job going through the budget and weaning through, and the departments have done a great job on our side going through it. But my consternation is that by going with a 99-cent tax rate, it is not going to be possible to meet the services that this county needs. We heard this afternoon that to make the cuts on our side of the street, and we'll leave, since we cannot, make the determination of what to cut on the other side of the street, to make the cuts that we need to make on this side of the street, we will be putting in danger some of the programs that this board and other boards have tried to put it forward, as far as fire and rescue and public safety and social services. And I just can't understand the rationale of just keeping it at that rate and saying that we could find the money at this point. It just doesn't seem to be a prudent fiscal policy.
Any further discussion? Ms. Shelton and Ms. Mauer.
Yes, I want to follow you, Mr. Cohen, because there's some things that I think that we're talking about that maybe some of you may not have heard. And so one piece of it is that several of us have been talking about, we don't even want to raise taxes. I don't want to raise taxes. We are very compassionate about our individuals, but one of the issues of of having that compassion is that what it would force us to do is cut our public services. That was our discussion earlier today. Where are we going to find those cuts to be able to do that? To be able to make the funding for the salaries for the public servants that we need to do. And that the discussion was we need to cut our services and find that. I can't support that. And one of the reasons I don't support it is because another thing that I realized, and maybe you hadn't heard, is that 1 penny on our rate is average of $30 a year per person. That's nothing. That was the cost of my dinner tonight. So from my perspective, I think that we need to be mindful of what we're doing to our citizens, and I said citizens, I'm sorry, to the residents of Stafford County, and look forward into the future for what do we need to make our future much brighter. We've heard lots of testimony, lots of discussions about our salaries for not just county employees, but also school employees. And the only opportunity was to decrease that and keep it at 99 cents and then cut that out of our budget. I will never support cutting any of our services that we currently provide in Stafford County for that reason.
Ms. Mauer.
Mr. Foley, I have a couple of questions. The 99-cent tax rate assumes an $18 million increase for the schools between county and state funding and federal funding?
The local number is 3.7. And we had some numbers, I think I would have to ask. 14.7 was the additional state money, and 3.7 was the local money in the
Okay.
proposed budget.
So roughly 18 million.
Don't
14.7 is the total.
14.7 is the total.
Okay, so $14 million increase on the school sides, and what is the increase in the budget on this side?
I'll have to ask budget staff, why don't you come up and answer those specific questions? They'll have the numbers in front of them.
And while staff is making their way, my point of asking these questions is we're not cutting our base budget. I mean, these are significant increases at the 99 cent. Ma'am?
The county budget increased just over 7 million. 3.7 of that would have gone to the schools.
Okay. So in the 14 million, is that the 3.7 million that is going to the schools? Okay, so we're getting roughly 3 million on this side of the street, 3.7 million on the other side of the street. Is that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just want to make sure the numbers are clear. And so we talk about this 99 cent like we're cutting the budget. And we're not. There's actually an increase in Stafford County in the budget at 99 cents, keeping the tax rate stable, of roughly 17, almost $18 million. And in that budget, the 99 cent budget that was presented to us, there was a $1.9 million compression pay for our state public service personnel.
That's correct, Ms. Mauer.
Okay, so on top of the 2.5% that was in our budget, there was also an additional 1.9 million in order to address this hemorrhaging we keep talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
At the 99 cents.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my point to all of this is that, cats aren't going to start sleeping with dogs. We're not talking about cutting services. We're not talking about cutting the budget. We are actually, this is a significant increase on top of the significant increase that we gave last year to the school division, which quite frankly, I supported a tax increase last year, and my difficulty with supporting another tax increase outside of a reassessment year, I believe that given the fact that we've got, $18 million worth of new money, we ought to be able to find these raises and do the hard work and be able to fund the priorities, but the key word is priority. And when we get to the budget, we're going to talk about priorities and we're going to talk about what we're going to fund, but I believe everything can be done at a 99 cent tax rate.
Any other discussion? Anything at all? Yes, Mr. Cavalier.
Yeah, I think, having been through 16 of these budgets now, we asked our county administrator during the work session, and Tom said he could absorb the 5% proposed, that some people have proposed pay raise for employees within the framework of a 99 cent tax rate. You answered that. Did you answer that affirmatively, sir? I thought you did.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can get some cuts. That would effectively mean $1.6 million of cuts, and I don't think we could do that without cutting some employees that are potentially in place now. And most of our workforce and the changes we've put in the last few years have to do with social service and deputies and firefighters. So it would be a very difficult thing at 5% to do. There was some discussion about lower amounts, and I did indicate that we could find some savings if we had to. The 1.6 would be a significant challenge. If that's the direction the board gives us, we'll have to dig into that and find out some ways to do that. But
right, and just the one category I saw was other non-departmental that averaged that was $1.6 million in and of itself. So between that and some other categories, I don't think we would suffer from that proposal. And on the flip side, the schools, to get to their 5%, which I still support the 5% for all employees, and I have from the get-go, and I remain true to that. So I think they can do it because that would be a little over 1% of their budget on the cut overall to get there. And to date, the school board has not offered any cuts, basically, of any significance, at least, that I've seen. So I've seen too many budgets before that there's, in the end, had they dedicated the money to the employees, the money would have been there for bigger raises. And so I believe that can be accomplished both on the county side and on the school side within the framework of 99-cent tax rate. So I'm going to support the 99-cent tax rate and hold the line on that, but I'm also going to support 5% pay raises for all employees, and I believe that that can be done within the $200-300 million budgets. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any other
Yes.
comments? Yes, Ms. Baumke.
So I am very concerned about the hemorrhaging in the school division and with employees that are leaving in the county, as far as our deputies, utility workers that are very underpaid, as well as our fire and rescue staff. Our turnover rates are very high in these departments, and we are continuing to have new employees come in. We are continuously making a reinvestment in new employees every year, and that costs a lot of money. And it affects morale because people don't want to be mentors for other people because they've done it and they're there for 3 years and then they move on. So in any organization, whether it's government or corporate America, your best investment is in your people. And so I am very, I want to increase taxes. That's why I agreed to go up to the 103, not the 104 2 weeks ago. I know for a fact that our class sizes are very large. I also know that we are not retaining people in this county. It is a problem. When I look at the sheet that we have in front of us right now on some of our comparative counties, and specifically Spotsylvania, they gave a 4% raise to their school people and 3% to administrators, and 2.4 on the county side. Part of it was a COLA, and then there was an other factor. We have to continue to keep up. And in my humble opinion, we cannot afford the 5% across the board at the 99-cent tax rate. We can't. We're going to have to make cuts within the county, and the school division is going to have to make cuts. And when you look at their per pupil expenditure level, we are not where we need to be in Stafford County. So I personally cannot support the 99% rate because I think it's digging too much into the county budget as well as the school's budget. Yes, there are some things. I read the entire school budget, and there are a few areas where they can make some cuts. But if you want to try to make some of the other increases that were listed on the, on the school's spreadsheet, these other things are not going to get addressed. The stipend adjustments, the first phase of the compensation study, it's not going to happen at the 99% tax rate. There's not enough money. It's like buying a car and you only have 3 wheels on it and a half a tank of gas. Thank you.
Mr. Foley, can I just double check on something? Earlier, several times, you and I have talked about the possibility of bringing up our public safety up to market this budget year, half and then half again. If it's the 99-cent rate, is that challenging?
The proposed budget at 99 cents actually included the funding to try to achieve that.
Right, but if it ends up in 3 weeks or so, when we actually get to the budget, and it's the will to go for 5%, would that put a challenge on you?
There would be a challenge, and the question would be whether we would have to cut back on the market
Part or
increases
something.
in order to come up with the $1.6 million.
Right, okay.
And it's just so hard for me to say
Right.
where we would be. Staff has put a high priority on that in our proposal, so I think we try to stay away from that. But that, we may have to look at some positions in some of those other departments.
Okay, thank you, sir. And there's that and social services where we have a diversifying population. and we have been making strides to try to deal with that. And I'm just concerned that we're in the 21st century with a diverse population, with diverse needs, with people who can go a few miles, apparently every direction, and do better. And we're just turning a blind eye or hoping that there's going to be a way to make it happen.
Any other discussion? Ms. Shelton?
I wanted to remind people today, in many of the briefings that we heard today, one of the things that we heard was that we have a decrease in the revenue related to our real estate projections. That happened today. We also heard a recommendation to hold our $870,000 that we would normally give to OPEB because we're worried about our liquidity. We also heard that our health insurance costs are going to increase. And just not that long ago, we heard that our water sales are decreasing. So we have this fluidity going in, and that's kind of actually ironic with water, right? And so, anyway, so we have some changes that are going on, and we're seeing that. And so it's hard for me to understand why we would not consider some increase in our taxes to give us that. One of the things that we have not discussed, we keep talking about raises, is we don't talk about how are we going to fund our capital improvement costs that we know that are coming towards us right now. You've seen many of our projections. Set aside whether or not we receive the right information from the schools. We know within our hearts about the right time we need to bring in high school number 6. We know that we need a new courthouse. And by God, every one of us does not want to be number 1 in congestion. We know we need to do something about our roads. Where do you think that money's going to come from? And so it's certainly not going to come from cutting social services salaries. It's not going to come from decreasing deputies or not building a fire station. I think that we need to be responsible and look at this as a whole picture and get ourselves prepared for that. We can't just keep putting off everything. Eventually, we're going to have to pay for it. And one of the realizations we had there's a piece of it that did change that gives us a little bit more fluidity, and it has to do with where one of our elementary schools come in. But that doesn't impact us for the next 5 years. In the next 5 years, we're going to have to come up with how many millions of dollars in debt, and our credit card is maxed. And so my issue is I want us somewhere in our debt, not our debt, but whatever we're savings and looking at our tax rate, is to be able to have some room to be able to grow. Right now, we're structured in such a way that we have no flexibility. And I want us to have that agility to make the right kind of decisions, whether it's for a school, whether it's for a road, whether it's for something, rather than cutting social services salaries or finding little incremental things. And by the way, Mr. Cavalier, in all due respect, within that line that you were talking about, those are contracts. We can't eliminate contracts. It doesn't work that way. I know you don't know that little bit of detail. We found that out later. But I just thought I would share that with you. So, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cavalier?
but just in response, Ms. Shelton, I did look at the details, and there's much more than contracts in there.
There are.
It's a laundry list of things, and I was looking at it with staff, and they said, yes, there are things we can cut there. So, but I'll move on from there because it's inconsequential. But I did want to bring up, because Mr. Foley brought up the market adjustments, and I think that was what, $1.9 million is what just on our side. And the schools have also done some market adjustments on various categories of employees. And so, my priority this year is the 5% for all. And it doesn't include, my priority doesn't include the market adjustments. So if you take the market adjustments out of the equation, you do have room for 5% for all within the current constraints that we have within the tax rates. And that's what I signed up for, and that's what I believe. I think everybody would be fairly happy with a 5% raise across the board. In this day and age, I think it's significant, but it's been shown that we're not keeping up with our neighboring jurisdictions, and people are leaving because of some other rates in other neighboring counties. I don't really care what's going on down in Richmond, but the fact of the matter is that if we don't do the 5% this year, I believe we're going to dig our hole deeper. And I think the 5%, well, it doesn't solve the entire problem. It gets us to a point that maybe then in the future years we can look at market adjustments again, which we've done in the past, and they have some merit. But it's not an equitable way. It's just like targeting groups of employees, saying you're not going to pay your administrators more because they make more. It's gonna. You're not saying you want to pay bus drivers or paras more because they don't make as much. Let's stop singling out groups of employees. I'm tired of hearing that year after year after year. Let's just do an across the board increase and make it fair for everyone.
Any other comments? I guess it's my turn. I've heard a lot in the last month about how terrible Stafford County is and how far we've fallen, and the sky is falling. We have no infrastructure improvements. Our schools are going down the tubes. It's just a terrible place to live. And that really upsets me, because this is not a terrible place to live. This is a great county. We have done more infrastructure improvements in the last 10 years than we did in the previous 40. We have one of the top school systems in the Commonwealth, and everyone in that school system should be proud of it. We have a triple-A bond rating, one of 49 localities in the entire country that has that rating. And let me tell you something, from someone that's been on this board through all three of them, it wasn't easy to get. So let's step aside and take a look at where we are. I cannot, in good conscience, vote for an across-the-board 5% pay increase. I am not going to vote to give an individual who makes $226,000 a $12,000 pay increase. I'm not going to do it. And I'll sit here till the cows come home before I vote for it. Now, with respect to fire and rescue, we need to keep that $1.9 million. It needs to stay in the budget. I am all in favor of a 4% pay increase for everyone, I guess, administrators and below, administrators 3%. Exact same thing that Spotsylvania did. Just did it this week. I don't have a problem with that. But if voting for this 99 cents means that we're going to do a 5% across the board, I'm going to vote no. So with that said, if anybody wants to respond to what I've said, you can, but the reality is I will not support a 5% across the board.
Just one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cavalier.
I don't like to follow Spotsylvania's lead on just about anything. So I will take issue with that aspect of your speech there. But
Well,
with all due respect.
I appreciate that, Mr. Cavalier, but the reality is we've been compared to Spotsylvania for the last 2 months. So the reality is if we want to keep up, we're going to have to at least match them. Mr. Dudenheffer.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not exactly sure. We're right now talking about the tax rate. The budget is a different thing at this point, so I'm not real sure what you just said as far as the tax rate goes. So we have a motion on the floor for 99 cents, which generates enough income for the budget that was presented to us by our county administrator. It has a 2.5% pay raise. I don't know exactly what you're advocating for. You're advocating for a tax increase? No. But you're not advocating for 99 cents.
What I
And
said
I don't
was-
understand what that
What
means.
I said was, I would not advocate for 99 cents if in the next phase, the budget phase, we go 5% across the board pay increase. I can't do that. I cannot, in good conscience, give a 5% across the board. And in my opinion, based on what the county administrator said, he could not afford a 5% across the board at 99 cents. Couldn't do it.
Wouldn't that discussion be better served when we start talking about the budget? I mean, we have to establish the tax rate at this point. Last year, I thought I had an agreement to send some money on infrastructure, and that collapsed after I was the one who advocated for the tax increase. And I've regretted it ever since. You know, this county cannot sustain a tax increase every year. We had it last year. It's a non-assessment year. We've never raised taxes in a non-assessment year, and there is absolutely no discussion of what happens next year. No discussion whatsoever. So they came up with 5% this year, you know, and all of the various discussion, you know, we'll probably, I mean, what's to stop from coming up with 8% next year, or 5% even, and having to, you know, we're already hemorrhaging money for certain actions by the state legislature and by a vote of the public that we're going to have to address next year if the state doesn't give us any relief. So we would be looking at the third straight year of tax increases. That pendulum will swing back, and it'll swing back really, really hard at this point. I think we need to go forward at 99. We need to compromise and figure out what we're going to do on the budget and move forward from there. At this point, trying to discuss, just like what Mr. Cavalier was saying, trying to come up with an agreement on where the tax rate, I think that's a whole different discussion. We need to decide where we are on the tax rate now so we know what the revenues are, and then in 2 weeks or whenever we're going to discuss the budget, in 3 weeks, the next meeting, I think there was some consensus about deferring until then to get questions answered. But at this point, I don't see how we can actually come to any discussion or agreement based on something that we expect to have happen in the budget in how we set the tax rate.
You're correct. You're correct. You're exactly right. I guess what I was trying to do is make sure everybody understands on this board that I will not support 5%. When we get to the budget, I will not do that. So with that said, is there any more discussion? We have a motion to set the tax rate at 99 cents on the 100. Any further discussion? And all other tax rates as advertised, correct?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Baumke.
So, Ms. Light, if the tax rate is set at 99 cents and we work on the budget next week or 2 weeks, and the schools are given a 4%, I don't know where the board will be, but let's say they're given a 4% and then a 3% for administrators. How much is the school division going to have to cut their budget?
Approximately $2 million, Ms. Baumke.
Okay. And does that then fund all the other items that are on that sheet that we've talked about?
No, ma'am, they would have to look through their budget and scrub those items as well.
Correct.
But to come up above the 2.5%, which was in the county administrator's proposed budget, would be approximately $2 million for the schools and about $715,000 on the county side.
Okay. And before you, in the process of doing our budget, you guys had already, you and Budget and Finance, had already adjusted and reduced our budget by about $3.3 million. Is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. Can you give the board an idea of what some of those expenses were?
Certainly, we went through line by line through the budget like we do every year. We reduced the transportation fund, which was about $500,000 to support the debt service payment in the transportation fund. We reduced health insurance by about $857,000, which is currently in fund balance. We looked at payroll to make sure that we cut that back to exactly what payroll was and found some savings there. And there were some other significant items throughout, and we just went line by line.
Okay. So while some think that we can find the $769,000 in our budget, I would be more comfortable if we're looking for more of $250,000 versus $761,000. It's not going to be good if we have to let go of staff in a growing county. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Mowers first, then
Yeah.
Mr. Cavalier.
So we keep talking about letting go of staff. How many new positions do we have in our budget at 99 cents?
There are 20 new positions.
20 new positions. And so we're not going to be laying anybody off because we may not hire 20 new positions, but there are 20 new positions in this budget. And 5 of them, I believe, is just in the contracts department, correct?
Certainly, and a number of those are revenue or cost neutral.
Okay, and the other question I have is what is the increase in the number of students that they're expecting across the street roughly? Do you know? 200, 300? We got Mr. Fulmer. 400 students, and so I'm looking at the back of this sheet that everybody keeps showing the front of, but if you turn the page, and you look at this page, where they're adding 83 new personnel for 400 kids. Some math on that, just a little bit of one person for every 4.5 students we're adding to Stafford County Public Schools. Is that math roughly correct?
Yes, ma'am, that would be roughly correct math.
Okay, I'm just throwing that out there. When we're talking about cuts, and we're talking about, meeting the needs of an increasing student population, and I recognize some of these are compliance, but when every year I look at some of these rough numbers, and last year we had this same thing. There were 55 compliance positions, and we looked down into it. They weren't compliance positions. They were the school board staffing standards, which were sometimes 1 to 2 to 3 times more than what the state required. It's what makes Stafford County Public Schools great, but we keep adding these massive amounts. We add roughly 200 to 400 kids per year, which is a significant amount of growth. But to add a person for every 4.5 children, it starts to become troubling. And so when we talk about areas where we can cut, these are areas that just roughly off the top of my head jump out at me. So I want to make sure that we're not mixing apples and oranges here when we say, oh, we're going to have to cut staff. We actually are adding in this budget at the 99 cents 20 additional staff members. And we're actually adding, according to the school budget, 83 additional personnel, which is roughly one person for every 4.5. This is rough math, students that we add to the schools. And we've been doing this for years. And so I just want people to kind of put this into perspective. When we think about, having to cut, we're cutting increases. We're not cutting base.
Mr. Cavalier.
Andrea, we've gone so many numbers tonight, but just getting back to the pure basics again. At the 99-cent tax rate, how much money did we add to each of the county budget and the school budget? 3.7 for the schools and what for the county?
The county was removing the 3.7 was about another 3.5 million.
Another 3.5, so 7 point something
Just over
total.
7 million
So
of
by
new revenue.
lest anyone think we're cutting any budgets or keeping them the same, we are not doing that at 99 cents. At 99 cents, we are adding over $7 million to our overall budget. And so, just reiterating again, all we're doing is trying to have everyone work within that constraint and reduce some of the increases they're looking for in so that they can attain these raises. And I don't know what they're going to be yet either. I've heard 3 or 4 numbers bannered about now. I'm going to stick with the 5% because I think that's doable. But I just want everybody to think we are not cutting anybody's budget from last year. Just the opposite. We're increasing. So I need that to be perfectly clear. Thank you.
Any other comments, Ms. Bumpke?
Okay, so I just did some math on the 83.5 positions that one of my colleagues mentioned. If you look at the compliance of that 5.1 million, 1.7 is compliance. So you've got 3.4 million left. Then you have growth of 1.8. So you have roughly 1.6 million that is required for staffing standards or best practice. So I don't necessarily agree with others' interpretation of those numbers.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cohen.
Andrea, since you're enjoying standing there, refresh my memory if there is the 1% increase. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Maria told me in this afternoon, that it's $15, it's $30 for a whole year, 15 in June and 15 in December. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's correct, on an average tax bill,
Okay.
Mr. Cohen.
And I think the average that people, that was given to us is about 300,000. And when I've talked to people who have called me concerned about the going up to the 103, and I say, well, the discussion's all over the place right now, and if it's $1, which is, that's Ms. Shelton's first idea, or one of the ideas being, she's saying 102, but we're talking either 99 cents or we may go up to $1. We're talking about $15 twice a year for that. Is that roughly what we're talking about?
That's correct, Mr.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but some of those 20 new positions are for social services to meet the need that our diverse population is going to.
Social service workers and deputies, and there are some utility positions in there that won't be on the tax rate, they'll be on the service fee, so, you know, the numbers are actually less than 20 in total positions that have anything to do with this decision.
Right. And lastly, something that was directly said to me by one of the school board members at the dinner, and then I believe it was Ms. Shelton who also had to endure this comment. Whenever we said, well, gee, you know, we really think that on your side of the street you could prune, you know, that our staff, Mr. Foley and his people have gone through this and just done a terrific job. And when you were talking about the number of positions that were already weaned out already. And for example, there was one in planning that people in my district would love, people I know would love, but when they were told you only could have one position, long-range planning or this other one, and staff cut the other one, people were like, yeah, I can understand that because we're not made of gold. But the two different school board members have said if they have to make cuts, the first thing they will look at is our fire training class, which quite honestly is a meaningful program to help students that are not in the, you know, generally not in the gifted 1%. And so this is where, you know, when we start saying there's going to be cuts, it's going to hurt the long-term goal of this county, which is to get competent, qualified, local people to work in our fire and rescue and to keep our sheriff's deputies. So I get it that these are new positions, but I also get it that we are a growing community and these new positions are not frills from this budget. Mr. Foley et al. Have done a terrific job of basically pruning frills. And so I understand the argument. I just don't think that going the 99 cent really is helpful for our community.
Any other discussion? Ms. Shelton and then Mr. Cavalier.
While you're there, ma'am, how much money do we have set aside for future transportation needs in our current budget?
The current budget has $3 million from fiscal year 18 ending balance that would be available to use for future transportation needs. It also earmarks some of the gas tax revenue, about 915,000 rough numbers, to provide for road wedge widening.
That's correct, you said that. So I'm assuming that our board members, my fellow board members, think that's enough for us to use because they're not asking for additional, I know there's not a question into you. It's just surprising to me. And so I understood that $3 million that we had future planning that we were going to use that money for, and we would not have additional money unless we went back out for a referendum, another tax to support those transportation improvements. So if that's all the money, then I guess you've answered that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cavalier?
Just quickly on the issue Mr. Cohen brought up about the fire training program with the school. That wouldn't be new for this year. The school board turned that down last year, and it's a minimal cost to them anyhow, and they still turned it down because it wasn't a sexy enough program, I guess, to justify. And it's sad, really. It really is that we're throwing out things like this because they do have a value. But we had a work session today, the final work session on the budget, and we didn't have anybody from the schools represented there that we could ask them questions. What could you cut to make this happen? In fact, we got, a little briefing on their budget that included, really, by the time you took out all the beginning fluff, about 7 pages in a presentation from a school board member. And really, the work session produced absolutely nothing. No questions were answered. And now we have questions and we can't get the answers. And it's very difficult to try to come up with, what the right number is for the school system without their answers to our questions. And we don't have the data. We got their budget book. It doesn't have a CIP in it. That factors into things. So, we're going to get the blame no matter what happens. I understand that, and I've got the blame for 16 years on this, and no matter what happens this year, I expect to get the blame again, and I accept that role. But I cannot condone the non-participation in this budget process that the school board has shown this year. It is the most disappointing action by the school boards I have ever seen in all my time on this body. Thank you.
Just a quick question, a follow-up to Ms. Shelton's question. $4 million or so you said we had to spend in our transportation fund. None of that money is encumbered in the future with all the various little pockets of money we need to spend for revenue sharing and all the other projects that we heard about today and stuff where we had money coming out of transportation fund. That money is above and beyond all that?
So the $1 million, or the $915,000 that's for the road wedge widening projects is listed as part of the transportation budget for fiscal year 2020, so that's earmarked for that. The $3 million that
Well, it only can be spent on that, right? It can't go into the general fund or spend on anything else.
No, sir.
The tax rate money has to go to transportation.
Yes, it has to go to
Okay.
transportation-related items. So the road wedge widening is maybe a good use of that. The $3 million that's coming in that is currently unencumbered, I think as we continue to go through the CIP and transportation continues to give updates on project costs, we're going to see if that money is necessarily earmarked for future costs. At this time, it is not. We had funding from the transportation impact fee of about $2.4 million that could be repaid back to the transportation fund for some projects that happened on Brook Road and I believe Courthouse, items that we have paid for already in cash, so we can repay the transportation fund. We've earmarked that $2.4 million for costs that are coming in over those budgets in the transportation fund at this point.
But I guess my point is, the only money that is actually recurring that you can count on is tax rate money, but that also is declining because that also pays for our VRE subsidy, and that is climbing. So as that climbs and the people use less gas, we can't really depend on that increasing. So really, we have no dependable source of income that's coming in right now to the transportation fund for future road projects. We talk about $1 million at the end of the year if we have money left over at the end, which you can't count on. Am I accurate? What am I missing if that's not the case?
Well, certainly I think that we're seeing some better than recent historical gas tax increases. With the gas tax floor, we're projecting in fiscal year 19 to be about $1 million over our fiscal year 19 budget. And we factored that into fiscal year 20 into the proposed budget, and that's how we came up with money for the road wedge widening. Our VRE and our PRTC subsidies have remained fairly flat. I think they've reduced a little bit in fiscal year 2020, but those you are right, sir, they rely on those ridership numbers. PRTC has a different formula that they use to come up with what the jurisdiction subsidy would be.
Right.
But they do fluctuate.
So we technically, except for, we have no steady stream of income coming into our transportation fund at this time. I mean, you know, and we can talk all around all the little pockets and where it all comes, but we can't count on that. What, do you remember what the cost of the, the courthouse road widening for 2.5 miles was? Wasn't it in the neighborhood of $30 million? So you get $900,000 a year with all the transportation issues, and we're just widening 2.5 miles of courthouse road. I'm trying to get to something that Ms. Shelton said. I know that she has a passion for this stuff, for trying to come up with income or revenue for some of our infrastructure costs. I couldn't agree more with her, but I would challenge the fact that last year, we thought we had an agreement, and every penny of the 3% tax increase last year went across the street. We didn't save any money for transportation or other infrastructure needs, and I fear that that would be exactly the case this year if that happens. So, again, we have needs across the county far bigger than the schools ever think that we have, and we can't afford to keep raising taxes thinking we're covering and paying for it, so. But thank you. I think you do a great job, by the way. And how you remember all those numbers all the time is beyond me. And I'll just reiterate real quick, I had a conversation with Mr. Foley this morning. I told him, please don't think that we don't appreciate the work that you guys do and the effort you put into it and the knowledge and everything that you do. And having to deal with 7 of us, I don't even know how you begin to do that. So I really do appreciate all the work you put into this.
Well, that's
Any other
very kind,
comments?
Mr. Dudenheffer. And can I say that I did make an error in a number earlier? This is a really great segue.
Oh.
Ms. Bumke asked about the 4% and the 3% for the schools, and I said it was about 2 million. It's closer to between 2.5 and 2.9.
Any other comments before we go to vote?
Yeah, just one last
Ms.
thing.
Baumke?
Based on what Ms. Light just said, so we would be putting the school division in a $2.6 million hole, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
With the 4% and the 3%, or with the 5%? I've got too many numbers in my head.
I think, as
That's
I was
based on the-
chastised earlier, we need to wait till the budget before we discuss raises. We're now talking about the tax rate. So if there's no other comments on the tax rate, if there are, I'll hear them now. Otherwise, we'll go to vote. Any other comments? We're voting on a substitute motion to set the tax rate at 99 cents and all others as advertised. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. The motion passes 4-3. Ms. Light, I want to thank you so very much for what you've been doing, and unfortunately, it's not over. We've still got the budget to go through. But I will underscore what Mr. Dudenheffer said. You guys have done yeoman's work, you and your whole staff, and Ms. Perrott, all of you. And I know we all appreciate it. Sometimes it doesn't come across that way because we get a little frustrated, but we really appreciate what you've done. With that said, we move on to the next item, which is Finance and Budget Authorized Fiscal Year FY 2020 Budget and FY 2020-24 Capital Improvement Plan. Yes, Ms. Mauer.
I'm going to start with the easier one,
Correct.
because we had this discussion in our work session on the CIP. So I'm going to make a motion to defer proposed resolution R19-74, which is the fiscal year 2020 through 2024 CIP, to the second meeting in May.
I have a motion to defer to the second meeting. I have a second with Mr. Dudenheffer. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. Coming back to the fiscal 2020 budget, I think we're in a position now where we need to give staff some real guidance on raises, et cetera. I don't feel that we can vote on this tonight unless someone else says we can, but
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
While the tax rate was critically important in order to get notices out, I would also like to defer the budget so we could have just a few more work sessions on it, if possible, to the second meeting in May. Would that cause consternation? Would that cause problems? And as I say that, I'm worried about teacher contracts. I remember that's difficulty. So the first meeting in May may be better.
Mr.
Second.
Chairman,
I thought you just asked a question.
It was a question. First question, and then I'll finish making my motion.
the challenge that we have is that the school system has to adopt a budget in time to approve teacher contracts.
Right.
They're scheduled to meet at the end of April, as I understand it. And I think that there's a statutory date by which they have to approve contracts. So I think we could put off all of the other things, but if you want to give direction to the schools on something related to a raise that's contingent upon the money you give them, we would need to be able to get a motion from you tonight in that effect so that we could pass that on to them as they make a final decision. For instance, if you said, I mean, you just approved a 99-cent tax rate. If you say we expect 5% raises, we need to get a motion from you all to that effect so that it can be passed on. They understand your intention. And if that amount of money is tied to a 5%, and otherwise you're going to reduce what frankly right now is $3.7 million at 99 cents. I think they're going to need to know that by a majority vote of this body tonight.
That does not mean we have to vote on the budget tonight.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Mr. Cavalier.
I'll go ahead, because everybody knows my position's clear, and I'll just go ahead and state it right up front. Make the motion for 5% for all employees, county and school, and that's my motion.
I have a motion for 5% across-the-board pay raise for all employees, county and school. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
I have a second from Mr. Dudenheffer for discussion. Mr. Cavalier.
I think I pretty much covered all my bases in prior comments, so in the work session today, I'm pretty well talked out on this. So if anybody doesn't know my position, please ask.
Well, if they don't know it, they haven't been in the Commonwealth, or they haven't a hearing problem. Any other discussion? I'm sorry, Ms. Shelton.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that for those that didn't attend our work session. And so we had multiple scenarios that were proposed to us, whether it was 2.5%, 5% for the employees, 5% for teachers, 5% for county employees, 5% for everybody, 3% for administrators. Everything above the 99-cent rate was going to require an increase in taxes. And so one of the things that we talked about was forcing cuts into budgets to be able to meet that tax rate. Why I'm bringing that up is because, as we've all mentioned, we have gone dramatically through our budget books and gone line by line. County staff has gone by line to decrease any expenditures that we could get to this point. I don't believe that Stafford County has the fat, if you will, in our budget to be able to support a 5% raise within the county. I don't want to say this and not be rude, but since we haven't seen that kind of due diligence with the school system, I suspect that they have the ability somewhere to decrease theirs by 1%. And even though ours is only, $760,000, I still think it's a bridge too far. And so I will not support that.
Any other comments on setting a reso to direct for a 5% across-the-board pay raise? Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, the quandary is, and I've harped on this, so I'm not going to harp anymore, about it is, but if we're looking at our employees and saying to them, we want you to stay, if we want the fire, police, utilities, et cetera, to stay in this county, we need to do something to entice them. And quite honestly, I think that we put ourselves in, well, some have put us in a box on this, but we need to give some enticement to the people the deputies that are going to the postal service, for crying out loud, because they get paid more. It just needs to be something, and it's just, if it's the 5%, we'll keep some of our employees in the county, then all the power to it. I would love to think that, you know, we could do what we really should do, but we didn't.
I have a comment.
Ms. Bumke?
So I could have supported the 5% across the board if we had been going with a higher tax rate, but I can't support it at a tax rate of 99 cents.
Any other comments?
Yeah, that's
Cavalier?
absolutely crazy to say that when you've been saying all along you're not supporting it. So you said 4% with less for administrators. So why'd you just say that?
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none. This is a resolution to provide a 5% across the board to both county and school employees. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. Ms. Maurer, you didn't vote.
The pressure is on.
Did you vote? Yes, there it is. I'm sorry. The motion fails 4-3. Do I have another motion? Ms. Maurer.
All right, I'll make a motion. I will go with the superintendent's recommendation of 5 and 3, and this is strictly just for guidance towards the school division.
Let me clarify that. Is this, does not include the county?
No, we'll deal with the county when we get to our budget. And the reason for this is that the reason we're looking at the pay increase for the schools is because we have teacher contracts.
Correct.
So we don't have that same time constraint here on this side.
I'll second that.
I have a motion to do a resolution to the school system for a 5% pay increase. At what cutoff do we want to do the 5%?
I'm going to go with the superintendent's recommendation. What the superintendent put in his original budget, it was 5 and then 3 for administrators, and the guidance that he provided in his original budget.
Mr. Foley, would you have that handy? I hate to put you on the spot right now, but this happened another
Mr.
lifetime
Chairman,
ago
that
to
is
me.
defined as the administrators, the school administrator scale. It would go up 3%, and everybody else would go up 5%, as she has proposed. From my understanding, that is what the superintendent had proposed.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor to do a reso to the schools that, to follow the superintendent's recommended pay raise, a 5% for all employees except those identified as administrators who will get a 3%. Is that correct, Ms. Maurer?
Yes.
Do I have a second? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Shelton, I didn't catch, second by Ms. Shelton. Any discussion? Ms. Bumke?
I have a question for Mr. Foley. So at what point would we make a decision on county employees?
Madam Chair, unless there's a special meeting, the next opportunity would be the first meeting in May, and that's roughly 3 weeks from today. There's a long break in here.
Okay, and would we have a work session prior to that on the budget?
It's certainly the pleasure of the board, but I think we would need to revisit these issues. And
Okay, I would appreciate that.
Any other questions, Mr. Cavalier?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that you want to give 5% to all employees, but that's exactly what the SEA said from the beginning, 5%, no ifs, ands, or buts, and now we have a but, and so I can't support it.
Ms. Maurer?
You know, Mr. Snelling's kind of made an excellent point. We've got somebody right now who's on spring break in Key West, and it's just tough to agree to a $12,000 raise. I mean, there are some buts, and I just can't. That $12,000 raise is probably the same raise you would give to a significant number of your bus drivers or a significant number of your, front office personnel or even a significant number of your teachers. One person. And in good conscience, that no ifs, ands, or buts, that butt gives me so much pause, it hurts my head. And so I can't and I won't. And so I will go with the superintendent's recommendation.
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Cavalier.
to put one person's salary and to screw up a whole category of employees makes absolutely no sense to me. You're taking into account every principal, every assistant principal, a lot of other administrators who work 12 months out of the year and who do a very good job. And, oh, by the way, it's teachers who move up into these positions. So you're really looking at their future here too and affecting that future for everybody by taking this action. If you really want to not give the superintendent the raise, then it's, let's say, 5% for everybody but the superintendent. And I guess, you know what, I don't think he'll have a problem with that because he's making a lot more money than he was making in Harrisonburg here. And so if you'll take that as a friendly amendment, I'll vote for it every day.
Mr. Cavalier, I'm sorry.
Yes, Ms.
Mr.
Shelton.
Chairman. Mr. Cavalier, I was actually going to suggest maybe you would consider a friendly emotion, or motion. Substitute emotion would have friendly emotions. Yes, that'd be sweet. No, considering that I seconded, I don't think I can make a substitute motion. And so I think that the point of consternation really has to do with, are we giving a message to the schools, which is what I think that I want to do, is for them to be constrained in the way that they apply their budget and give them that 5%. And on that, I'm willing to give all of them 5% because I think there's some compelling stories to be said that's supporting what your position is, sir. On the other hand, I do not feel that way about the county. And the last motion was combining both of those.
Right.
And so when those two are combined, I won't support that. So that's why I seconded what Ms. Maurer stated. If you would like to make a substitute motion, go for it.
Well, if I'm not correct, assuming I'm correct in that this motion only pertained to school employees, is that correct? Right. So, Ms. Maurer, I'm going to re-ask the question. Will you take a friendly amendment and only exclude the superintendent from that motion? And if you choose not to do so, I will then make a substitute motion. I'll give you first opportunity.
I'll wait for your substitute.
All right, that, I
Mr. Cavalier.
will make the substitute motion then to give all school employees, with the exception of the superintendent of schools, the 5% pay raise.
I have a motion by Mr. Cavalier to send a reso to the school board. All school employees, with the exception of the superintendent, would get a 5% pay increase. Do I have a second? Not hearing a second, it dies. The motion fails. Back to the original motion. 5% for all school employees except administrators, who would get 3%. Now, my concern is, if we go 5% and 3%, what does that do to the county raises? We did not raise taxes, so how much money would we have to come up with to provide raises to our employees? Because traditionally, we have given the same raise to county that we have given to the school system. We were at, I believe, $760,000 you'd have to find.
Mr. Chairman, to do the equivalent amount on the local government side would cost just over $1.3 million, which means we would have to reduce our budget in other places by $1.3 million to match that.
Okay. Mr. Cohen.
And this was sort of, when you made your comments, and you said that you started talking about the percentage pay raise and people demurred at you doing that. And so the conversation became solely just tax rate, tax rate, tax rate. To me, it's not just a cart and a horse. It is a cart and a horse together. And here we are with the same problem that you were wisely saying that was going to be a problem, that people demurred and said, oh, no, thou shalt not do that. No, thou had to do that. And so I'm just flummoxed because for example, one of my consternations with this is that, and I've harped on this for over years, our administrative assistants apparently at all, are below market. And so if we say this, they may get a 5%, or they may still get up to minimum of market, or we don't know. This is the problem, where we just set a tax rate that boxed us in, and now we're trying to talk about how this theoretically is going to impact X, and then maybe X and Y, and X, Y, and Z. And this is just very frustrating. To all my students out there who I say making laws is like sausage, yeah, here you go. This is bratwurst.
Any other comments?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Bumke.
So I agree with what Mr. Cohen just said, is we've got ourselves in a pickle now, because we are squeezing the orange and there's not enough juice in the orange. And we're going to have to make cuts now.
We haven't passed this resolution yet.
No, I understand. So, but we're in a quandary now,
I'm not.
okay? Well, then we'll vote on the motion.
Any other comments, Mr. Dudenheffer?
I've been very, I've told a lot of people who contacted me that this board does not set salaries for the schools. I have no real say in setting salaries for schools. So why are we sitting here discussing salary increases for school employees? It's because we can't count on the own school board to take care of their own people. In a work session we had, a joint work session, when asked if we sent money to you and designated it, we wanted it to go for pay raises, would you guarantee us that they would go to pay raises? And they categorically said no. So they pushed us into this hole of having to get involved in something in a way that I find very distasteful. I mean, I think the schools should run and set their priorities and do what they need to do. But when they categorically don't deal with the issues staring them in the face, and then they say it's the Stafford County Board of Supervisors problem, I have a problem. So I'm sitting here now being pushed into an area where it contradicts what I've been telling people, because I've been telling them we don't set salaries for the schools. So I find this entire discussion distasteful, because we set salaries for our employees. We've never done this. We've tried categorical funding in the past. That didn't necessarily work at the time. It may be an option in the future at this point. So I only say that because, I feel like I have said and told people a falsehood, or that's something that I can't substantiate and live by. But sometimes you get pushed into a corner and you're stuck trying to do what's right for the most amount of people. And so while I would love to see teachers get a 5% pay raise, I'm going to support this motion because it's the one on the table that comes closest at this point.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Foley.
just a point of clarification in the motion. The budget at 99 cents provides 3.7 million to the schools. And I think your message to them is that from that amount of money, you expect them to make other reductions to get to a 5% and 3%. And the question is whether there's also a message if they don't do that. Because 3.7 is what's in the budget at 99 cents. Is there a message that if they don't do that, they will get something less than the 3.7? And I wouldn't know what the message would be about how much less it would be. It's the amount to give the raise that you've proposed is 3.9 million more than the 3.7. So is the
Calculated 2.5% as part of that. Part of the 3.7 was a calculation of 2.5%. What is the other 2.5%, or 2.5%?
You asking what the basis was for
Yeah.
the total 3.7?
Yes.
It did include the money to support 2.5. It also included money to maintain the per pupil expenditure number as the enrollment grew.
Right.
And there was some slight bit amount of other dollars available, but that was the lion's share of it.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to take this motion first and then give some direction, but I didn't know if it had some implications to how you proceed with this. Again, to get to the 5% is actually more than what is even set aside, so what the withholding would be, I guess, is the question.
So the withholding for the entire 5% and the 3% is 3.9.
That's what it would cost
What
above
is-
the 3.7.
Okay, and what is the withholding for 2.5 and half?
What's the
So
amount for the
part,
two-
part
original
of,
two
part
and
of
a
the
half?
calculation that, because keep in mind that part of what they're getting is also coming from the state. So there's a total increase that I'm thinking of, and that's a $14 million increase that the school budget is getting. And so what would be the remaining 2.5 and half?
Yeah, so on the spot, I'd have to look to our budget staff. They would
Okay.
have to get the state revenue number. They'd have to look at what 2.5% was of the 3.7, and we'd have to add those together. And doing that at the podium right now, we probably couldn't do that. But we could probably do it with a break and give you some idea. But again, for them to achieve 5 and 3 is more than even we're proposing to give them, although you're correct, only a portion of the 3.7 is the 2.5. But that is before the 3.9 million that you're asking them to come up with otherwise. So it's a quandary, yes. And the question is whether the board's intent is to send some type of a message about what the consequence would be in terms of how much you would ultimately appropriate, because all you're doing now is sending a budget message. So, and they're going to be sitting down on the 30th of April working through this. So they won't know what the consequence is if that's not clear.
Before we go any further, I want to apologize to Ms. Bumpke. I was very short with you. It's been a long day, and the nerve endings are getting kind of tingly, so I apologize for being rude to you.
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh, I do.
Your day's getting long, too.
Your day's getting long.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, here we are at 5% for teachers, 3% for administrators. Any further comments? Ms. Bumpke?
I just want to make sure I understand. We're voting on something that will cost the school division another 3.9 million.
Yes.
Any other comments? I am not going to vote for this. Part of what Ms. Baumke just said, but just as important, I don't think the county side can match that increase. It would increase, we'd have to cut 1.3 million instead of the 760,000. And from what I've gotten today, it could be, I think we could cut to 760. I think we could get there. I would be suspect. I doubt very seriously we can get to 1.3, so I will not support this motion. Without any further, let's cast our votes. Tally the vote. We got a slow tally. The motion fails 4-2 with, Mr. Cavalier, are you voting? The motion fails 4-3. So we're back to the board.
I'm out of motions.
Ms. Mauer says she's out of motions. Do I hear a motion as to a resolution we should send across?
I have an idea. Could we go back to resetting the tax rate?
I don't think we can do that.
You can only if somebody who
Voted in favor.
favor of the passing
Can
motion
reconsider it.
requested it come back.
And I will do that at this moment if I can get assurance that we can give 5% to all.
And what would that tax rate be moved to?
What do you want it moved to?
Do I hear $1.02?
I think we might need to have a recess.
Could we get a, yeah. Well, no, could we get a recess so I can get rid of, you know?
Okay,
Ms. Shelton
so-
has asked for a recess to use the facilities.
I would like a recess to talk to budget staff.
We will take, it is 9:13, we will reconvene at 9:30.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the earlier vote on the tax rate.
The actual motion is having voted on the prevailing side of the
Microphone.
motion such and such. I requested it be reconsidered.
I will take that as an amendment to my motion.
Is Mr. Cavalier's,
Two votes.
Mr. Cavalier's motion is in order?
Consider it, then we have to vote.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. This motion requires a second.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Shelton. The motion is to reconsider the earlier vote to set the tax rate at 99 cents. Do I have hear any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, does that
Ms. Bum.
motion have to be seconded by somebody?
No, I'm sorry. The motion is to reconsider the 99-cent tax rate.
Does the second have to be from somebody on the prevailing
No, it
side?
does not.
No,
No.
does
Mr.
not.
Chairman,
Okay,
Supervisor
thank
Bobke
you.
does not.
Okay, do I have any discussion? Hearing none, cast your votes. This is to reconsider. Tally the vote. The motion passes 4-3. Mr. Cavalier, do you have another motion?
Yes. So now, my motion on the tax rate is to set it at a rate of $1.01.
Second?
I have a motion to set the tax rate at 101, second by Ms. Bomke. Any discussion?
I just wanted to
Mr. Cavalier?
reiterate that motion then is tied to giving a 5% pay raise to all school employees.
All employees, not just school employees. Isn't that what we talked about?
I don't think we can
We-
tie it. I don't think, excuse me, I don't think we can tie the raise to the tax rate. Ms. County Attorney, I'll ask you for some help here, but
Can't put conditions on
we
the tax.
we can't put conditions on the tax rate, is that correct? Mr. Foley?
Mr. Chairman, I think we're back to where we were before. You need to set the tax rate, and then we need to have a discussion about the direction over to the schools, which,
Misunderstanding here.
Okay, is any, in other words, okay, we're going to consider the tax rate, and then we'll consider what to send to the schools. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Foley?
yeah, and I mean, I think it's a legitimate conversation you all can have about your final decision
Correct.
if need be.
I have a motion to set the tax rate at 101 per hundred. Any further discussion? 101, correct, Mr. Cavalier?
101.
101, any further discussion? Hearing none, cast your vote. Tally the vote. We gotta get a better tallier back there.
Jeez Louise.
Motion passes 4-3. Tax rate is set at 101 per hundred. Now, let's get back to the budget. Do we still want to send a resolution to the school board?
I still stand behind the 5%, and that was what everyone agreed to who voted for that last motion. So I will put that forth as another motion that the 5%.
5% across the board?
Across the board, yes.
Okay, I have a motion for a resolution to send to the school board advising them that of a 5% across-the-board pay raise.
What is the financial ramifications of that, the exact numbers, or close numbers, the estimates?
Well, I think, don't we need a second?
Yeah, I need a second first.
A second?
Second by Ms. Bomke. Mr. Dudenheffer.
We bounce all around. We never discussed the 102 or 101. What's that ramification for a 5% pay raise across the board with a tax rate of 102? How much now do you have to come up with? Because it doesn't fund the whole thing.
No, it doesn't.
No, that total cost to do that will be $5.9 million, just about $6 million. 1.6 is the local government side and 4.3 is the school side. How that extra 2 cents, which is 1.65, 1,650,000 times 2. You can do the math on that, and it won't total up to 6 million, and the question becomes, how much of that goes to the schools versus staying on the local government side? But your message to the school board, we'll still have to determine how we change the $3.7 million appropriation at 99, how much goes to the schools versus what stays over here, so the schools will know what your intention is. And then I think your message to them would be, as I understand it, is that if they don't give the 5%, then only 2.5, only the original 3.7 will go over. I think that's your intention.
Is that your intention? Is that the intention? That if they do not get the 5%, only the amount for the 2.5 will go over. Is that correct?
Which would have been the original $3.7 million.
Correct. Mr. Cohen?
Do we need another 15-minute break?
No.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking
No,
Mr.
I think we all have
Cavalier.
used the restroom or listened to thereof. If memory serves me from this afternoon, the language needed to have in there that, right, so therefore, basically the concept that the desire is for X, and if not, then it would be the 2.5%, to make it very clear that, as Mr. Cavalier brought up this afternoon, and I think not to be rude to Mr. Cavalier, but I think I put it in Reagan-esque terms, that if we don't make it clear, then it would be nothing goes over. So I think that's what you're intending, Mr. Cavalier, is to say that.
My intent, I don't intend nothing to go over, no. To make sure that that doesn't happen. But I think our message is clear here that this, if this vote passes, then that is the intention of our board for them to provide 5% employee raises. What is the exact fallback? I think the automatic default would be the regular budget, but I don't know whereas we're tied to that, to tell you the truth at this point. I think that all gets worked out in the budget that we haven't fully considered yet.
Can't we use the same language we used last year?
Yes.
We had a resolution last year where we tied it to the raise.
Last year's resolution was actually the appropriation resolution, and I think that if we get the numbers straight, the communication can actually be from the chair based on a formal vote of this board.
Okay.
To give them that direction that ultimately you'll wait to see if they follow through on. If they don't, then when the appropriation comes to you, it won't, that extra money won't be there.
Okay.
We still have the question, and again, I'm hopeful that budget staff is running some numbers right now, but we'll probably need some direction from you that the total cost of this is about $6 million. The total amount of the new revenue from the 2-cent tax increase is $3.3 million. There's a $2.7 million difference there. So that's $2.7 million of reductions that would have to come, and the question is how much of that additional $3.3 million is going schools versus local government. And there's probably some way to calculate that based on our payroll sizes, but I think we would have to let that happen so you can give a clear direction as to what that new number is. It's something above 3.7, but we need to know exactly what that is because they'll need to know that to finalize their budget.
Correct.
And So I know that Mr. Dudenheffer was kind of joking, but it might be that we need another 5 minutes to do that. Okay, she doesn't need 5 minutes, so that's why she's so good.
But you danced very well for that.
I talked long enough that she could calculate it, I think is what it.
Ms. Furley, thank you for stalling. One possible methodology would just be apportion the additional 3.3 million from the 2-cent tax increase based on the additional funds needed for the 5% across the board. So if you look at the chart from this afternoon, to do 5% across the board would be an additional about 4.4 for schools and 1.6 for the county, for a total of just under 6 million. That's about 73% of the total 6 million would be needed for school increase, and the remainder for the county. So that would come, and these are rough numbers, but about 2.5 million additional, just a little bit under 2.5 million of the 3.3 additional for schools, if it were apportioned that way. That's just one method that we came up with.
Okay. Do we have a motion on the floor? Ms. Baumke?
Could I make a friendly amendment that the 5% includes everybody, but it would exclude the superintendent?
Just to get a clarification on this, and Chris is here. Is the superintendent's salary tied to the cost of living adjustment that the other employees get? I know we do that with our county administrator, but you have a contract with the superintendent that may not stipulate that, and any raises may be subject to discretion of the school board at any time.
Good evening. Sorry to approach if I'm not formally invited. The superintendent's contract states that he will receive an increase, which is the lesser of the amount given to employees. So if administrators are given 3%, he would be given 3%. If it was a 5% across the board, his contract states that he would receive the 5% as well. Correct.
Thank you. Okay, a resolution to do 5% across, a resolution to the school board to do 5% across the board. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Cast your votes. Tally the vote. The motion carries 4-3. Moving on to item number 20, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Foley? We finished with that?
Mr. Chairman, did the
Yes.
board want to set a deferral date for bringing the budget back for consideration?
I'm sorry? I'm sorry. I
Did the
didn't-
board want to set a deferral date for bringing the
I
budget back?
don't care if we ever bring it back, to be honest with you. I'm just about right to here on this budget. I mean, can we just wing it? I mean, the U.S. Congress just wings it. Why can't we do that? No, being facetious, believe me. Okay, we need a motion to defer this, and
Motion to defer the budget until the next meeting.
motion to defer the budget till the next meeting, which is the first Tuesday in May. I have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion, Mr. Dudenheffer?
There's something I'd like to start with as far as the discussion for the budget that I think we should consider. And I think the very first cut in the budget needs to be the pay increase that the Board of Supervisors has in the line number, which amounts to about $35,000, which is a kind of a drop in the bucket. But I would like to say that a substitute motion would be that we defer the preponderance of the budget, but that we also cut that line number and put it back into the budget as far as the consideration for the cuts that need to be made.
I'll second that.
We have a second.
I have a motion by Mr. Dudenheffer to, actually, the first motion was you, wasn't it?
He made a substitute.
Substitute motion to, today's been a long day. I have a substitute motion by Mr. Dudenheffer, seconded by Ms. Shelton to not fund Board of Supervisors pay increase. Any discussion?
Are you incorporating the deferral in there?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're going to defer to the first meeting in May? Correct, okay.
Thank you.
But that, when we come back, we won't see that line number.
Correct. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, I'll support that, but tell you the truth, if push comes to shove, I would have transferred my entire salary to the 5% raise endeavor for all, because I feel that strongly about it. I don't do this job for the money.
Can I have it?
Okay, the night has been long. Cast your votes. This is defer. Tally the vote. Motion passes 7-0. Anything else we need to do on the budget tonight?
Mr. Chairman, just because of the quick movement here on the change, I just want to be clear that based on what you've done, local government will cut $650,000 from the budget, and the schools will have to cut 1.9. I just wanted to make sure you knew the effect of that decision.
Does that include the 35,000 we just gave back?
No, we can take that off of it.
You can take that
It's
off, so now you're down to how
within-
much now?
Yeah, it's actually was 800,000 local government cut. We have gotten some additional revenues based on the state budget and so forth, so that gets us down to 650. Take the 35 out and it's down to 625.
We're getting there.
That number is 650.
Before we move on to the next item, I would ask all of my colleagues to kind of let the staff work through this the next couple of weeks, and let them put together suggestions and come back to us. I don't think it's going to serve any purpose if we're in the budget office every day trying to make changes and recommending changes and asking questions. So let's just let them work on it and put it together, and we'll come back the first week of May. That said, we'll go to our last item of that night, number 20, Finance and Budget. Budget and appropriate Virginia Public School Authority funding for the Rock Hill Elementary School mechanical system renovation, proposed resolution R19-111.
Mr. Chairman, Andrea Light, Budget Director. Just in case.
Am I in the twilight zone? I mean, what is this?
There's a process, sir. We
I
follow
love
processes
Mayberry.
in
I hope
the budget
nobody's
office.
watching this show.
This evening, the board is asked to contemplate Resolution R19-111, which is to consider the budget and appropriation of Virginia Public School Authority funding in the amount of almost $2.9 million for the Rock Hill Elementary School mechanics systems. This is in conjunction with the issue of a contract. This VPSA would be borrowed through the spring and through the fall of 2019. And it does follow the board's CIP, budget and appropriation guideline, only appropriating 50% of the contingency.
Any questions, Ms. Light? No questions?
Mr. Snellings, I make a motion.
I have a motion to approve by Ms. Mauer. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Ms. Shelton. Any discussion? Cast your vote. Tally the vote.
Excuse me, but I don't have my.
You don't have your vote clicker?
It's right there on Tom's making your vote.
Oh, well, we got to start all over again.
You know short people, we like to take over
Let's
everything.
start over again. Cast your votes. Has everybody voted? Tally the vote. Apparently, we didn't vote. Okay, push. All right, it passes 7-0. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very long day. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. It's been a very long day, and enjoy the rest of your spring break, and happy Easter to everyone.